Chapter 1456. Once it was used, no one in the 8th step could withstand it. Especially under the world's end, it didn't take long for someone to bleed. Scarlet blood was everywhere. This kid is undefeatable. Someone finally realized this point. As the battle continued, they had already lost their confidence. There were actually 2 people who wanted to escape. But there was no chance now. Lin Yu had sealed this place with the origin ancient characters. Let alone 8th step cultivators, even 9th step cultivators would find it difficult to leave in a short period of time. Lin Yu was like a god of death wandering the world, cold and ruthless. Every time he made a move, someone would bleed. In particular, the 2 who wanted to escape were directly killed by Lin Yu. Although Lin Yu didn't have the Tao fruit of his previous life, his various spells had reached the pinnacle of perfection. Even the 9th step cultivators here hadn't reached Lin Yu's level. He was an invincible existence under the same cultivation level. Puff, in the blink of an eye, 2 people had fallen. Ancestor Su roared. His entire body was covered in injuries, and even his essence was almost destroyed. Lin Yu moved between them with ease. As the 2 of them were killed, they were now in a passive position. "Kid, don't be so arrogant," Ancestor Su shouted. "I'm afraid that even your ancestor isn't qualified to call me that," said Lin Yu indifferently. The Genesis Chi in his hand turned into sword light and directly cut off Ancestor Su's arm. Murderous Chi poured into Ancestor Su's body, instantly making him lose the ability to fight and fall straight to the ground. The remaining 2 people were terrified. They no longer had the desire to continue fighting. After Ancestor Su fell to the ground, he took advantage of Lin Yu's killing to come to the edge of the restriction and used his family's forbidden art to break the seal. In the end, he took out a talisman and chanted mysterious scriptures. Lin Yu inadvertently saw the talisman, and his heart was filled with surprise. He had seen this talisman paper before. It was very similar to the talisman paper burned by the strange throne. However, no strange aura could be felt from it. Instead, it carried a mighty force. The Su ancestor's heart was dripping blood. The Su family had paid a huge price to obtain this talisman from the unknown lands. It was extremely useful and contained boundless power. Yet now, for the sake of survival, he was willing to sacrifice it. As the talisman burned, a large hole appeared in the restriction formed by the ancient word of origin. The Su family ancestor was overjoyed and immediately broke free. He escaped from the outside world. There was still a crowd of onlookers outside. Suddenly, they saw a figure rush out. This person seems to be the Su family's ancestor. Why does he look so miserable? A cultivator at the 7th step caught a glimpse of the Su family's ancestor's current appearance. His jade crown was knocked off, and his hair was disheveled. His arm was broken at the base, dripping with blood. "What's going on down there?" Someone at the side kept retreating. They already had a premonition that a terrifying battle was taking place down below. To avoid being caught in the crossfire, they didn't dare to approach, and could only watch from afar. Down below, Lin Yu killed the last person and collected their belongings. Lin Yu knew that the people here had all auctioned off the last few items, which were of great value. He didn't let them go. The curtains were almost drawn on the Battle of the Divination Pavilion's pavilion master. The Skysword Sect's elder was killed, and even his corpse was burned by a strange Tao fire. "I've grown old. I can't believe it took so long," the pavilion master said with a sigh. After cleaning up the scene, Lin Yu once again used the power of the ancient word to open the restriction set up by the 8th step cultivators. With a rumble, Bright Moon Tower reappeared in the world. Lin Yu slowly appeared on the roof. An indescribable aura emanated from his body, causing everyone to tremble in fear. They didn't know how terrifying Lin Yu was. Those who had experienced the battle with their own eyes were all shocked. There were at least 5 8th step cultivators who set up the restriction. Now, they saw Lin Yu standing safely on Bright Moon Tower. The Sioux family's ancestor had escaped, which meant that the other 8th step cultivators below had all died. They had been killed by Lin Yu. Thinking of this, some of them couldn't help but gasp. The deacon of the Sky Sword sect almost stumbled and fell to the ground. He knew that the patriarch of the Sky Sword sect was also involved in this. But now, he couldn't sense his aura. Patriarch crippled sword, he. The deacon of the Heavenly Sword sect couldn't believe it and could only whisper. But soon, he realized that if Lin Yu sensed him here, he wouldn't be able to escape death. He suppressed his grief and anger and quickly fled. "Take me with you." Xiaoya couldn't help but cry out mournfully when she saw the deacon of the Heavenly Sword sect leave. But now, in order to survive, the deacon of the Heavenly Sword sect didn't care about that. He turned into a ray of light and disappeared from Monarch City. Xiaoya knelt on the ground and covered her face as she cried. She gave everything to the deacon of the Heavenly Sword sect, but in the end, she was despised. Lin Yu had already sensed the aura of the deacon of the Heavenly Sword sect, but he couldn't be bothered to kill such a person. Lin Yu looked at the token in his hand, which was emitting a weak light. The Sioux family's patriarch must be hiding somewhere. Before leaving, he wanted to take away the 8th grade alchemist. "If that's the case, I'll fulfill your wish." Lin Yu smiled. He had deliberately let the Sioux family's patriarch go. After all, the Sioux family's patriarch had said that the Sioux family had a deep foundation. As for whether it was true or not, Lin Yu had to find out personally. He was going to use his identity as an 8th grade alchemist. "It's good to have a spirit spring that can allow me to break through to the 9th step," Lin Yu said. After Lin Yu gave instructions to the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secret Pavilion, he disappeared on the spot. Then, in a restaurant, Lin Yu changed into a black robe. "Sioux family's patriarch, are you done with your business?" Lin Yu walked out of the room and looked at the miserable state of the Sioux family's patriarch. He couldn't help but worry. "Patriarch, what happened to you?" "It's fine if you don't say," the Sioux family's patriarch said anxiously. "Mister, come with me now. Let's go back to the Sioux family and discuss other matters." "Don't worry, the Sioux family won't mistreat you," the Sioux family's patriarch said sincerely. "No problem. This is a healing pill. Take it first." Lin Yu took out a pill. The Sioux family's patriarch ate it gratefully and said, "Thank you, mister." Then, the Sioux family's patriarch took out a compass and disappeared on the spot. When they saw each other again, they were already in the sky and were quickly moving in a direction. The man with the folding fan fell on the compass with a pale face. The people of the Sioux family didn't say a word. They were like stray dogs. As for Lin Yu's name, they didn't say a word. However, what they didn't know was that Lin Yu, who they hated, was in the middle of them and was being treated respectfully by them. Chapter 1457. The compass was huge, dozens of feet long. The heavily injured ancestor of the Sioux family was sitting in front of it, carefully controlling it. As for the others, they were specially instructed to take care of Lin Yu. A few days passed. It was unknown how many mountains and rivers they had crossed. Lin Yu looked at the sky above the clouds. The sun seemed to be at the same level as them. The Tao law here is indeed different. It seems to be the same as the Tao law in the origin land. However, the Tao law in the origin land is the most primitive. Lin Yu thought to himself. He didn't know where this world was. The suppression of the Tao was terrifying to the extreme. Lin Yu could clearly feel it from the sky. If it was in the universe, the 9th step could already destroy a great world. But here, in a vast ancient country, it could only destroy a region. The difference between the two was huge. This made Lin Yu ponder about this world. At the western end of the clouds, there was endless darkness. It seemed that even light couldn't penetrate it. It was unknown what was at the end of the darkness. The people of the Gauchan ancient country called it the unknown land, the eternal night burial ground. There were sages of the Gauchan ancient country who had once gone there, but there was no news of them. Very few people had returned. According to the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion, there were several powerful forces in the Gauchian ancient country that couldn't be offended. They came from the eternal night burial ground. Among them was the divine court. From the pavilion master's words, one could guess that there was an even more vast world at the end of the eternal night burial ground. It was magnificent. However, this wasn't something Lin Yu was thinking about. Another day passed, and they finally approached the territory of the Su family. One could see that the Su family occupied an endless territory. At the center was a city. Genesis Chi gushed out from the city, making it look majestic under the sunlight. The city was thousands of feet tall, and one couldn't see the end of it. Staring at the city gate was like being stared at by a ferocious beast. It made one's heart palpitate. The Su family had been passed down for tens of thousands of years. They were prosperous and had countless branches. Many people in this area were proud of having the Su family's bloodline. This was almost crazy. In this area, the Su clan occupied an unknown number of people, with a population of several million. Its scale was so huge that it was comparable to a mid-sized vassal state. However, the Su family had never been conferred a title. The Su family was indeed as powerful as the ancestor of the Su family had said. "Mister, what do you think?" The ancestor of the Su family turned around and asked. Now that he had returned to the Su clan, he no longer had to worry about Lin Yu hunting him down. "Mister, please rest here for a while." "I'll be right back," the Su family's ancestor said. Lin Yu nodded. He casually found a seat and sat down. After a while, two old men about the same age as the great ancestor of the Su family came over. One of them had a handsome figure, while the other had gray hair. However, they were all emitting powerful auras. They were all powerhouses at the 8th step. In fact, they were even more powerful than the Su family's great ancestor. Now, all the powerhouses at the 8th step that the Su family's great ancestor had mentioned were all here. However, the Su family was an existence that had reached the 9th step. Therefore, Lin Yu did not act rashly. "I'll stay here for a while and investigate the Su family's foundation," Lin Yu thought to himself. He did not know if the Su family had any other means. Lin Yu planned to stay here for a while and then make plans. He had already regarded the Su family's spirit spring as his. He wanted to break through to the 9th step. This was the best divine item. Now that Lin Yu had obtained the strange power of Yu Linglong and Lu Rushi's cultivation methods, he no longer faced any bottleneck. "I'm the great ancestor of the Su family. Greetings, mister." The person who spoke was the handsome old man. His tone was filled with doubt. After all, the third ancestor had paid a huge price in order to obtain this grade 8 alchemist. Even the divine items that came later were not included in the bidding. This made the great ancestor a little angry. If Lin Yu was not a grade 8 alchemist, this joke would have gone too far. "I know that you don't seem to believe me," Lin Yu said calmly at this time, playing with the teacup in his hand. "My big brother definitely didn't mean that," the third ancestor said. He had already seen Lin Yu's methods, so he tried to persuade the great ancestor and second ancestor. "Mister, please don't take offense. This is a last resort. After all, we paid a huge price in order to invite you here," the third ancestor said. However, he no longer respected Lin Yu as much as he did. After all, Lin Yu was no longer in the hands of the Su family. "Please prove yourself, mister," the great ancestor said. "I don't know. What kind of elixir do you want?" Lin Yu was puzzled. Chapter 1458. He had an insight into people's hearts. However, the Su family's great ancestor had asked him to refine pills as soon as he arrived. It was probably not that simple. Since you can refine a 7th grade 9 patterned heavenly spirit pill, I'm sure an 8th grade heavenly spirit pill is naturally not a problem. Therefore, I think you want to refine a few heavenly spirit pills, said the great ancestor. Greed is like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. How many do you want me to refine? Lin Yu asked back. No, just refine one first and let me believe that you are a genuine alchemist, said the great ancestor of the Su family. After all, the highest level alchemist in the Su family was only a 7th grade alchemist. They were all inexperienced. Okay, as you wish, said Lin Yu. His divine thought was powerful and had already sensed that the Su family's second ancestor was now at the peak of the 8th step, the second layer of heaven. However, he had encountered a bottleneck and needed an 8th grade heavenly spirit pill to resolve it. Lin Yu saw through it but did not say anything. Then I'll have to trouble you, said the Su family's third ancestor. They now seemed to have Lin Yu. Only the Su family's third ancestor had a slight respect for him. Lin Yu waved his hand and wrote out the pill formula. He said, "Find these herbs in 4 hours." The value of the herbs was not cheap. This made the Su family's great ancestor frown. However, the Su family's foundation was deep. He quickly ordered people to bring the herbs that Lin Yu needed. During this time, he also let the Su family's only 7th grade alchemist examine them. After confirming that there were no mistakes, he brought them over. "Sir, this is the pill you need," Lin Yu said slowly. "Alchemy is taboo to be disturbed. In 3 days, I will refine the pill and hand it to you," Lin Yu said. His words were indifferent, but he was very confident. "Is this set of herbs enough?" the great ancestor asked with a questioning tone. Alchemy was risky, especially for 8th grade pills. The success rate was very low. Even those who had been an 8th grade alchemist for a long time would not have a success rate of more than 70%. "It's enough. Since you want to test my level, 1 set of herbs is enough," Lin Yu said. However, as the great ancestor approached, a faintly discernible divine sense appeared in front of Lin Yu, trying to detect Lin Yu's true appearance. "Humph! Don't you think the Su family has gone overboard?" Lin Yu's spiritual force was so strong that it immediately shattered that hidden spiritual force. "Mister, please forgive me." The great ancestor reprimanded the second ancestor. However, it was obviously just an act. This was something that the Su family's ancestor had discussed. He wanted to know Lin Yu's true identity. "I hope you won't do anything out of line," Lin Yu said calmly. "Su Yun, follow Mister and see if you can learn anything," the Su family's ancestor said. "The method of alchemy is my family's secret. If the Su family insists on doing this, I'm afraid I'll have to leave today." Lin Yu said, "Before coming to the Su family, I've already told my friends in the 8th step. If they see my soul lamp extinguished, think about the consequences for the Su family." Lin Yu said coldly, "I'm sorry, mister. I didn't think about it." The great ancestor said apologetically, "Find a secret room for mister." The great ancestor ordered. The younger generation of the Su family led Lin Yu to a place with beautiful mountains and clear waters. Under the waterfall, a stone room was excavated. It was densely covered with runes that could conceal all auras. Lin Yu nodded. "Mister, if there's nothing else, I'll take my leave first." The younger generation of the Su family took his leave. Lin Yu walked into the stone room. He looked at the smooth stone wall of the stone room. There were a few priceless luminous pearls on it. They emitted a night aura. When one was in it, it had a calming effect. Lin Yu wasn't in a hurry to refine the pill. Instead, he set up a restriction here so that it would be difficult for the outside world to disturb and investigate. The crystal scene in front of the Su family's ancestor and the other 2 instantly disappeared and became blurry. The 7th grade alchemist sighed. It seemed that he wouldn't be able to watch the 8th grade alchemist refine pills today. "This person is very cautious," the great ancestor said. "He's very scheming and shrewd. We have to be on guard at all times. This alchemist's divine will has probably reached the 9th step. No wonder he can refine a 9-patterned 7th grade heavenly spirit pill." The second ancestor frowned when he felt that his divine will was still faintly hurting. The alchemist's alchemy method is different from each branch. This is also a reasonable thing. The 7th grade alchemist explained. Su-yun, if he really can refine an 8th grade heavenly spirit pill, you will stay by his side in the future. I will think of a way to teach you my alchemy method. The great ancestor said. This is the Su family. No matter how talented a person with a different surname is, in the end, he will be taken by the Su family. Only then will I feel at ease. The great ancestor's eyes were cold. Chapter 1459. These old guys are very cautious. I have to use some tricks. Lin Yu looked at the main ingredients for refining the heavenly spirit pill in front of him. Then, he took out a medicinal ingredient with a black aura. It emitted a stench that seemed to be able to directly invade one's divine sense. This was an evil spirit flower. After being refined by Lin Yu, it became colorless and odorless. If added to the heavenly spirit pill, it would cause a huge problem for the second ancestor's divine sense even if he broke through. In addition, Lin Yu used some tricks to make the second ancestor a puppet under his control. Thinking of this, Lin Yu took out the pill furnace and began to refine the heavenly spirit pill that the Su family needed. As the main ingredients were added into the pill furnace, Lin Yu used the universe fire and quickly extracted the pure substance from the ingredient. There were powders and liquids. A day later, Lin Yu had already extracted all the divinity materials. Then, it was the most critical moment of refining the pill. Lin Yu raised his hands, and the divine substance in them began to slowly blend together. Gradually, the embryonic form of the pill was revealed. This was his second time refining an 8th grade pill. However, with the support of the universe fire and powerful divine sense, he could control everything in detail. There was not much of a problem. Under the constant burning of the universe fire, the liquid of the pill evaporated. From the size of a fist, it gradually shrank. The essence of the pill, due to the mixing of several medicinal properties, underwent a mysterious change. The next day, lightning flashed and thunder rumbled in the sky above the Su family. Dark clouds covered half of the sky. Lin Yu walked out of the secret chamber. At this time, a pill rushed out of the secret chamber. 3 ancestors, quickly come and help me! Lin Yu shouted. The ancestors of the Su family had long been alarmed by the movement in the sky. Following Lin Yu's call, almost in the blink of an eye, they came here. They knew that the birth of an 8th grade pill would inevitably trigger a lightning tribulation. However, what they did not expect was that the momentum was so great that almost the entire Yu family could feel it. Some of the younger disciples of the Su family had fear in their eyes. The black clouds continued to press down, as if the world was about to be destroyed. It was extremely terrifying. This is the pill tribulation. Don't be afraid. At this time, an elder of the Su family came to the training field to maintain the basic continuity. 3 terrifying shadows appeared in the sky. They were like 3 burning eternal divine furnaces. For a moment, the dark clouds in the sky dissipated a little. Lin Yu sneered and sat cross-legged on the ground. The following pill tribulation was already enough to make the 3 of them suffer. You brought this upon yourselves, Lin Yu said with a smile. Now, he pretended to be weak. The 3 ancestors of the Su family stood under the sky. The grand ancestor couldn't help but frown and say, "This pill tribulation's momentum is vast. It's definitely a sign of the birth of an 8th grade pill." The grade 7 alchemist Su-yun also ran out of his room in a daze. His eyes were filled with fanaticism. Such a vast pill tribulation was his lifelong pursuit. The lightning tribulation of an 8th grade pill. I think with this momentum, it's probably at least above 7 lines, he said with certainty. The pill tribulation of an 8th grade pill was almost as strong as that of an 8th step powerhouse. In particular, the pill that Lin Yu refined was almost flawless in terms of grade. Therefore, even if the 3 ancestors of the Su family took action, it would probably be difficult to suppress it in a short period of time. 3 ancestors, I'll be responsible for stabilizing the pill. Help me stabilize the lightning tribulation. Just hold on for a day. Lin Yu said weakly. It seemed that in order to refine such a pill, he had expended a lot of energy. At this time, he was already on the verge of collapse and gradually could not hold on. The second ancestor nodded. This was a pill refined for him. If the pill was completed, he might directly break through to the third layer of the 8th step and be on par with the Grand Ancestor. At their level, every time their cultivation rose, it would take an endless amount of time. He had been at the peak of the second layer of the 8th step for many years, but there had been a bottleneck and he had not broken through. Now that he had the heavenly spirit pill, he was full of confidence that he could break through to the third layer of the 8th step. Boom! The first lightning tribulation approached without warning. Second brother, be careful, the Grand Ancestor warned. The second ancestor hurriedly came back to his senses. The lightning tribulation, as huge as a mountain range, suddenly descended. It directly illuminated the universe. It was like a scene of the end of the world. Some of the Su family's alchemists were stunned. This was too terrifying. If other people saw it, they would think that the Su family's ancestors had suffered the wrath of heaven. The second ancestor of the Su family staggered. His head full of white hair spread out like a hedgehog. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, accompanied by black smoke. This pill tribulation is too terrifying. The 3 ancestors of the Su family were shocked at the same time. However, before they could recover, the second lightning tribulation descended. The Grand Ancestor stepped forward helplessly. The 3 ancestors of the Su family had not recovered from their old injuries. Only the Grand Ancestor and the second ancestor were at the peak. Now that the second ancestor was injured, only the Grand Ancestor could replace him. Boom! However, the Grand Ancestor underestimated the power of the pill tribulation. Terrifying power spilled out, exploding in the sky. The Grand Ancestor was directly blasted out of the sky. Accompanied by a sky full of lightning, he smashed a huge hole in the ground. Deep ravines appeared on the land of the Su family, like a great canyon. Some elders hurriedly took the Su family's disciples and retreated far away to take refuge. However, no one expected the pill tribulation to be so terrifying. Therefore, some of the Su family's disciples, including the elders, fell into the abyss. No one knew whether they were dead or alive. Screams of agony could be heard everywhere. Lin Yu reminded at this time, quickly take everyone away and leave the area 100 miles away from this place. The 7th grade alchemist finally reacted. In terms of power, the pill tribulation of an 8th grade pill was no weaker than an 8th step cultivator's full strength attack. If they were not careful, the entire city of the Su family might collapse because of it. Su Yun risked his life and went forward, reminding the 3 ancestors, "Ancestors, you must hold on. If you are not careful, more than half of the Su family's ancient city might collapse." There was anxiety in his eyes. He had already realized the terrifying level of the pill Lin Yu was refining. However, now that the pill had appeared, there was no other way. They could only resist it head-on. The Grand Ancestor immediately used all the power in his body and ascended to the firmament again. "Why didn't you say so in advance?" he questioned Lin Yu. Lin Yu spread his hands helplessly. "I said before that I didn't want to refine in the Su family. You just didn't give me the chance." He was speaking the truth. 2 days ago, Lin Yu had said that he didn't want to refine in the Su family. However, the Su family's 3 ancestors were vigilant and didn't want Lin Yu to escape. However, they were now trapped in a cocoon of their own making, putting themselves in danger. The Su family's ancient city contained tens of thousands of years of accumulation. Naturally, they didn't dare let the pill lightning get close. "Open the Great Formation." The 3 ancestors worked together to open the formation that the Su family would only open in a moment of life and death. The formation was personally set up by the Sioux family's first ancestor. It had terrifying power. Following the opening of the Grand Formation, all of the power within the formation was blocked. The Sioux family once again turned into a paradise. All destructive auras could not get close. Lin Yu looked at the Sioux family's great formation. He now had a better understanding of the Sioux family's foundation. However, since it was a large family that had produced a ninth-step cultivator, their means were naturally not as simple as a great formation. In the next few days I will figure it out, Lin Yu said slowly. That was the reason why he refined the 9-mark Heavenly Spirit pill. He wanted to expose the Sioux family's danger and then use their foundation. Lin Yu had achieved his goal. However, it was inevitable that the Sioux family's 3 ancestors would be defeated. At least 1 or 2 of them would be seriously injured. Lin Yu maintained the pill and did not let it escape. The terrifying scene in the sky made everyone in the Sioux family feel apprehensive. It was the first time in 1 or 2,000 years that they had seen the 3 ancestors attack at the same time. The power of the 3 ancestors also shocked them. With the 3 ancestors, the Sioux family is at its peak. It's only natural, someone shouted. However, they couldn't see it now. The 3 ancestors were spitting out black smoke. Their hair was charred by the lightning tribulation. Chapter 1460. They had withstood 3 lightning bolts in a row. The Grand Ancestor, in particular, had suffered 2 slashes in a row. His arm was numb and almost out of control. However, he still tried his best to resist. Just as the 3rd ancestor attacked, he was careless and did not completely block it. The lightning bolts descended on Lin Yu, who was controlling the pill. Puff! Lin Yu's body trembled, and he forced himself to spit out a mouthful of blood. The pill also broke free from its restraints. Lin Yu looked anxious. He immediately got up and used his divine consciousness to seal the pill. "Third brother, be careful," the 2nd ancestor reminded him. This was related to his breakthrough to the 3rd layer of the 8th step. He could not afford to be careless. The 3rd ancestor was helpless. His old injuries had not healed, and he had already used all his strength. However, he did not expect that even the formation could not completely block the lightning bolt. Sir is exhausted now, and he has to control the pill to prevent it from escaping. There must be no accidents, the 2nd ancestor of the Sioux family said. There was anxiety in his eyes. The Grand Ancestor's expression was also serious. After all, this was related to the Sioux family's further strength. He had to protect it. "Third brother, rest at the side. Let me and 2nd brother do it," the Grand Ancestor said. He forced his strength to recover to its peak. He did not hesitate to use a forbidden technique. His body shone and turned into a large cauldron with mysterious runes intertwined on it. Clang! The lightning bolt struck it, and the sound of metal clashing shook the entire sky. The Sioux family disciples covered their ears. Some of them even bled from their ears. Even with the protection of the formation, the sound was difficult to block. Although they did not die, a large number of Sioux family disciples were injured. Clang! Then came the 2nd strike. The Sioux family's Grand Ancestor was beaten back to his original form, from a large cauldron to his original form. He coughed up large mouthfuls of blood. The Sioux family's 3rd ancestor wanted to attack. "Let me do it. You step back." The 2nd ancestor berated him. "2nd brother, are you looking down on me?" The 3rd ancestor was sullen. He had already suffered a blow when the Grand Ancestor told him to step aside. Now that he was being berated by the 2nd ancestor, he was very hurt. "Third brother, now is not the time to talk about this. Give me 2 of your recovery pills," the Grand Ancestor said weakly. The 3rd ancestor was filled with hatred. However, she had no other choice but to hand the pill over to the Grand Ancestor. "Mister, how long will it take for the lightning tribulation to end?" the Grand Ancestor asked. The 3 patriarchs couldn't take it anymore. After taking 2 bolts of lightning head-on, the second patriarch was also beaten to the point of coughing up blood. His body could not help but retreat. It should be soon. There are still 7 or 8 more. Ancestors, you must hold on. Lin Yu shouted. The 3 patriarchs of the Su family almost coughed up blood. There were still 7 or 8 of them left, and they were all injured. Thinking of this, they all felt a chill run down their spines. They couldn't help but shudder. I want to come. At this time, the great ancestor of the Su family showed his courage. He didn't forget to turn back and remind him, "Second brother, quickly take the elixir to recover your vitality." Second forefather could only nod helplessly. Now that they couldn't take it anymore, they could forget about getting the pill. "Third brother," said the second patriarch. The third patriarch handed the pill over. In a flash, the grand ancestor spat out a large mouthful of blood and retreated. They felt so insignificant in the face of the heavenly tribulation. His strength was almost completely depleted. Another mouthful of blood. The second patriarch was almost knocked to the ground. If it weren't for the great formation blocking and slowing his fall, he might have landed somewhere unknown. Now, his entire body was charred black and smoking. "Third brother, you want to take a few hits?" said the second patriarch. Didn't you say you didn't need me just now?" The Su family's third patriarch snorted coldly. However, when he saw that the lightning tribulation was about to descend, he gritted his teeth and used the forbidden art the grand ancestor had used just now. He transformed into a large cauldron with patterns of birds and beasts on it. It was simple and natural, and carried with it a sense of immortality. Transforming yourself into a cauldron that's immortal and indestructible. Not a bad art. Lin Yu smiled. He looked at the Su family's patriarch's wretched state and had no intention of helping. He merely looked on indifferently. However, he was somewhat interested in the forbidden art used by the Su family's patriarch. Cauldron, bell, gourd, pagoda. Those artifacts were born with Taoist rhymes. There was obviously some reason for the Su family's forbidden art to transform oneself into a large cauldron. However, the Su family's third patriarch gritted his teeth and took a hit. He coughed out blood and fell onto the great formation. "The third patriarch is injured," someone muttered softly. They were in disbelief. In their eyes, the patriarch had always represented invincibility and invincibility. However, he was now directly blasted onto the great formation. He looked very miserable. Why is third ancestor's skin so dark? It seems like there's even smoke coming out of it. A gifted and intelligent young child sucked on his finger in confusion. The adults at the side hurriedly covered the child's mouth. It was the greatest taboo for the clansmen to criticize the patriarch. They would be severely punished. Now, although everyone had seen it, no one said anything. They only frowned, worried for the 3 old ancestors. "I can't take it anymore," said the third patriarch. "My old injuries haven't healed. There's nothing I can do now." The grand patriarch and second patriarch looked at the dark clouds in the sky that had yet to dissipate. They gritted their teeth. Their clothes were torn, revealing their charred skin. From the sky, it looked like a small black dot. Now, the auras on their bodies had withered. However, there were still 3 or 4 lightning bolts left. They could only take them head-on. "Second brother, we'll each take 2. The grand patriarch gritted his teeth. "All right, big brother, you go first," said the second patriarch. He was really afraid of being struck by lightning. The 2 of them thought of the same thing. They were betting on whether there would be more lightning bolt. As a result, they could take 1 less. The Grand Patriarch looked at the sky and smiled helplessly. As the Grand Patriarch, he should take it on himself. "For your breakthrough, second brother, I'll give it my all," said the Grand Patriarch. He spat out a few mouthfuls of blood essence and wiped it on his body. It turned into a large cauldron. However, the cauldron was strengthened by the Grand Patriarch's blood essence. It glowed red and illuminated a large area. However, in front of the vast lightning tribulation, it was still like a small boat in a storm. It swayed with the wind. Boom, the first strike. One could clearly see that cracks had appeared on the cauldron. Blood splashed out. It was extremely tragic. The disciples of the Sioux family couldn't bear to look at it. The cauldron looked like it was about to collapse. Boom, the second strike followed. The cauldron was almost melted. The entire cauldron was surrounded by lightning. It carried a terrifying aura. The cauldron hit the formation. The Grand Patriarch coughed out blood and turned into human form. After blocking 2 saber strikes, he actually fainted. It was impossible to tell if his face was pale or something else. It was as if he had taken a bath in a pile of coal. Chapter 1461. The second forefather shuddered at the sight of the forefather's wretched state. But seeing that there were only 1 or 2 left, he had no choice but to face them head-on. Let's go all out. Using his hand as a blade, he sliced open his palm. His blood, imbued with divine radiance, sprinkled into the sky and quickly condensed. The second forefather transformed into a cauldron and appeared in the sky. He used even more essence blood. Beneath the terrifying thunderclouds, he remained unmoving. Boom! The first bolt of tribulation lightning took a long time to build up. The cauldron merely trembled slightly under the blow. Although it was covered in cracks, it was still able to hold on. However, Lin Yu had a smile on his face. The second bolt. The second forefather coughed up blood, his eyes dim. It's finally over. I managed to hold on. The second forefather was overjoyed. The thunderclouds in the sky gradually dissipated. Before the second forefather could rejoice, another bolt of tribulation lightning came crashing down on him. There's still one more. The second forefather shuddered. The final bolt of tribulation lightning came crashing down on him. He had no choice but to spit out a large amount of essence blood to forcefully withstand the final bolt of tribulation lightning. Boom! In the end, the second forefather fell onto the formation's light screen with a plume of black smoke. You lied to me, sir. Those were the second forefather's last words. Finally, he fainted on the formation's light screen. A beam of light shot out from the Sioux clan's lands, carrying the 3 patriarchs away. Is this the Sioux family's concealment technique? Lin Yu looked toward the Sioux family's ancestral grounds. He could clearly sense that the 3 forefathers' auras were rapidly recovering. This was the mysterious power of the ancestral grounds, and it wouldn't cause the Sioux family to fall into dire straits. The spirit spring should be there as well, Lin Yu deduced when he saw the dense divine substance shrouding the area. Just now, after the 3 Sioux family patriarchs had been injured, he had been prepared to make a final strike. Fortunately, he'd held back. The ancestral grounds revealed a power that made Lin Yu's heart palpitate. There was definitely something inside that could threaten him. The pill appeared in Lin Yu's hand, the black smoke on its surface disappearing in a flash. It was one of the reasons why the pill tribulation was so terrifying. Lin Yu had added something into the pill, which was why it was like this. This should no longer be called a heavenly spirit pill, but a heavenly venomous pill. Lin Yu smiled as he injected a strand of his spiritual consciousness into it. Next, he would wait for the second patriarch to recover from his injuries, consume the pill, and become his puppet. Lin Yu was confident that the Sioux family did not have a 9th-grade alchemist, so they would not be able to find any clues. Time passed quickly. He had already handed over the pills to Su Yun. The 3 ancestors of the Sioux family came out of seclusion. Although they still felt weak, they had more or less fully recovered. This was the strength of the Sioux family. He believed that as long as they recuperated for a few more days, the 3 ancestors of the Sioux family would be able to recover to their peak. In the main hall of the Sioux family, Lin Yu was sitting on a chair with his eyes closed. A few days ago, we were presumptuous. The second patriarch was in a good mood. Not long ago, Su Yun had told him that there was no problem with the pill, and that it was an 8th grade pill with 9 patterns. It was a supreme grade pill that could definitely allow the second patriarch to break through to the next realm. This undoubtedly made him in a good mood. However, the great ancestor said coldly, "Why didn't you tell us that you would need to undergo the pill tribulation after refining the pill? The quality of the pill can only be determined by the alchemist's intuition. If I knew, I would not have refined a supreme grade 8th grade pill and caused the 3 ancestors to suffer." Lin Yu opened his eyes and said calmly, "Indeed, the path of alchemy requires not only the right time, place, and people, but also the control of the alchemist." Su Yun said. This was based on his own experience. "Sir, it is a great thing that you can refine an 8th grade pill with 9 patterns. You can't blame him." The second patriarch was obviously in a good mood after receiving the heavenly spirit pill. However, when he thought of the thunder tribulation that day, he could not help but shudder. "But why did you lie to us during the pill tribulation? Why did you only make the last few strikes and almost kill my second brother?" The great ancestor continued to question. "I don't want to explain too much about these things. If the grand ancestor thinks that I'm deliberately messing with you, I'm free to leave." Lin Yu naturally wouldn't admit defeat. He stood up and prepared to leave. He pretended to be angry at this time. The pill tribulation is indeed uncontrollable. You can't blame Sir. Su Yun took out an ancient book from somewhere and pointed at it. The ancient book could not predict, but Lin Yu had mastered the ancient characters and could not be unaware. "Sir, please wait. My big brother is straightforward. Please don't take it to heart." The third patriarch came in front of Lin Yu and secretly said to the great ancestor, "Keep him. As for what happens next, we can talk about it later. He can't escape from our hands." One was angry and the other was angry. Lin Yu stopped in his tracks. However, he sneered in his heart. Now, he understood the nature of the Su family. The great ancestor put his hands behind his back and did not say anything. The third forefather smiled obsequiously and pulled Lin Yu back to his seat. "If the Su family continues to be like this, I don't think there's any need for me to stay here," Lin Yu said with a tough expression. "No, of course not in the future," the third patriarch said. "Have you arranged a residence for Sir?" The third patriarch immediately scolded Su Yun after seeing that Lin Yu's emotions had stabilized. Yes, Su Yun said. "It's on Medicine Peak." "Is it the courtyard behind the main hall?" The third patriarch continued to ask, pretending to be meticulous. Su Yun was at a loss for a moment. "Then hurry up and arrange for Sir to enter. Don't you know his identity?" The third patriarch scolded, "After arranging for Sir, you'll be punished here." Su Yun complained incessantly. This was clearly the intention of the 3 patriarchs. He was just following orders, but now he was going to be punished. "Yes." Su Yun bowed. He was inarticulate by nature, and was about to say that this was the intention of the 3 patriarchs. However, a pressure made him not dare to speak. "Sir, please follow me," Su Yun bowed and said. "Sir is now the master of Medicine Peak, and has absolute authority. Even we can't interfere," the third patriarch said sternly. Then, he smiled and asked, "Are you satisfied, Sir?" Lin Yu nodded lightly. Then, he went to Medicine Peak with Su Yun. Although he had been living there for the past few days, it was a side room arranged. After all, the Grand Patriarch wanted to test him, so he didn't pay much attention to it. It's better to keep an eye on him. "Don't let him leave Medicine Peak," the Grand Patriarch said. He had always been suspicious of Lin Yu. Won't this make him unhappy? The third patriarch was worried. After all, he was an 8th grade alchemist. He must have made friends with many experts in the entire North Star ancient nation. "We'll talk about other things after a few months." After the Grand Patriarch finished speaking, he said to the second patriarch, "Enter the clan ground and prepare to break through to the 3rd level." Chapter 1462. When he arrived at his residence, it was a courtyard with strange rocks that looked ancient. "Sir, you will be staying here from now on," Su Yun said respectfully. He had an unimaginable obsession with elixirs. Especially after witnessing Lin Yu's methods, his respect for Lin Yu had reached its peak. "Thank you for your hard work," Lin Yu said. "I will be in the courtyard not far away. If you need anything, you can call me at any time," Su Yun said. 7 days had passed. Lin Yu sat cross-legged in the courtyard. He had already set up a restriction here. He knew that the Su family's third forefather was wary of him, so he did not go to the Su family during this period. Although he did not understand the Su family in the past few days, it did not mean that he could not leave this place and have some tricks up his sleeve. Has it begun? With his eyes closed, Lin Yu could already sense that the Su family's second forefather had already taken out the Heaven Spirit elixir and was preparing to refine it. Lin Yu's spiritual consciousness appeared at the place where the Su family's second forefather was cultivating. Lin Yu's spiritual consciousness was now at the 9th step. In the entire Su family, it was the most terrifying existence and was difficult to detect. Even the methods left behind by the Su family's first forefather could not detect it. Lin Yu's spiritual consciousness arrived at the place where the Su family's second forefather was cultivating in seclusion. "After today, I will also be a cultivator at the 3rd level of the 8th step," the Su family's second forefather said. His eyes were filled with joy. He did not expect that he could break through so quickly. It was all thanks to Lin Yu. If it were not for him, he might have to cultivate for a long time. However, the Su family was ultimately just using Lin Yu. How good would it be if such an alchemist was a member of the Su family? The second forefather looked at the elixir in his hand that was emitting a strong medicinal fragrance, and could not help but sigh. Then, he adjusted his aura and restored his condition to its peak. In the past few days, he had used the clan's land and a large number of elixirs to fully recover from his injuries. He was now in his peak condition. His white hair once again shone with a luster. A strand of Lin Yu's divine sense was attached to a mosquito. It was currently lying in the seclusion area of the Su family's second patriarch. Without the slightest hesitation, Su Yun had already examined the pill several times and confirmed that there was no problem with it. The second ancestor of the Su family swallowed the pill in one gulp. As the pure medicinal power spread out, gradually, an aura of someone on the verge of a breakthrough appeared on his body. Dense mist appeared in the secluded cultivation room. There was a strange spell formation here that could connect to the spirit springs in the ancestral lands. He was now standing next to the second patriarch. The rumbling sounds continued to ring in his ears. The entire earth was shaking. If it weren't for the restrictive spell, the entire ancient city of the Su clan would have been affected. Countless mountains would be destroyed because of this. An expert in the 8th step was already a peak existence in the North Star ancient nation. The breakthroughs of this level of experts were extremely shocking. It was like an ocean, making it impossible for others to see through it. As they reached the final step, Lin Yu's divine sense, which was attached to the mosquito, communicated with the medicinal power of the pill. At this moment, the second patriarch of the Su family frowned. He felt a strange movement in his body. However, this feeling was very weak and disappeared in the blink of an eye. He didn't think too much about it. He was now at the critical moment of the breakthrough and couldn't be distracted. The breakthrough of the 8th step was a transformation in all aspects, including the divine sense. At this moment, Lin Yu had already extracted all the medicinal power from the pill and was constantly invading the location of the second patriarch's divine sense. The second patriarch had already sunk into oblivion. By the time Lin Yu had completely invaded the second patriarch's divine sense, it was already too late. "Who are you?" The second patriarch's divine sense condensed and turned into a small person. Now, His body was in a mess, and he felt that someone else's divine sense was constantly invading his body. He couldn't help but be shocked. This was because this was the periphery of the Sioux family's ancestral lands and was airtight. It was impossible for anyone to enter. "You have been hiding in the pill all this time," the second patriarch of the Sioux family immediately determined. "You are No, you are the Linyu that third brother mentioned." After the third patriarch of the Sioux family returned to the Sioux family, he had told the great patriarch and second patriarch about Lin Yu's appearance and his terrifying talent. Now that he saw Lin Yu's appearance, he couldn't help but be shocked. "You are not stupid," Lin Yu said calmly. "What is your purpose in coming to the Sioux family?" The second patriarch of the Sioux family frowned. "Naturally, it is for the Sioux family's divine treasure," Lin Yu replied calmly. "You are courting death. How dare you come to the Sioux family?" the second patriarch said. He directly activated his own divine thought and pressed down on Lin Yu. This was the second patriarch's body, and everything was under his control. However, the poison in the heavenly spirit pill had spread throughout his body as he continued to refine it during his breakthrough. Even within his divine sense, there was a black liquid that hindered the second patriarch's power. When the second patriarch felt the changes in his body, his expression changed drastically. "You tampered with the pill." The second patriarch of the Sioux family finally understood. Lin Yu had turned into a grade 8 alchemist and come to the Sioux family. He had been secretly setting up a trap. Now, the first one to suffer was the second patriarch, who was about to break through. "You are indeed as third brother said. You are extremely scheming," the second patriarch said. He now found it somewhat laughable. The three great patriarchs of the Sioux family had been secretly trying to obtain the full value of a grade 8 alchemist. Now, the roles of the two parties had been reversed. Unexpected. The second patriarch of the Sioux family felt the changes in his body and felt powerless. When he had first met Lin Yu, he had used his divine sense to probe him. He had already known that Lin Yu's divine sense was vast and had probably reached the 9th step. Now, he was deliberately targeting him. He had set up such a trap. It was unexpected. He was afraid that he was in danger today. That's not right. Why has second brother's aura become so chaotic? The great patriarch had been guarding the second patriarch. At this moment, he felt something from it. Second brother is now at the critical moment of breaking through. It is understandable that his aura is chaotic, the third patriarch said. The great patriarch was about to intervene to check, but he felt that the third patriarch's words made sense. "Let's wait and see." The third patriarch motioned for the great patriarch to calm down and said, "You and I both know second brother's talent. He has been at the second level for many years. Now that he has broken through with the heaven spirit pill, it is just a matter of time." The great patriarch nodded. Lin Yu looked at the second patriarch indifferently. "I originally wanted to snatch what I wanted and leave. I didn't expect the Sioux family to be so greedy. You three great patriarchs, don't worry. I won't let any of you go," Lin Yu said indifferently. Threads appeared in his hand. This was the condensation of the power of his divine sense. They carried the power of runes. Lin Yu's divine sense was constantly being nourished by the clay jar. It was close to being indestructible. Now that he attacked, even if it was only a small part, it was still difficult for the second patriarch to resist. The second patriarch was instantly bound. Lin Yu was constantly eroding his divine sense. Divine sense was a person's foundation. If one's divine sense was controlled by another, it meant that one would be completely reduced to a puppet. The Sioux family has existed for tens of thousands of years. How could it be destroyed because of an unknown child? The second patriarch shouted. He did not hesitate to burn his divine sense to break free from Lin Yu's restriction. But he realized that it was all in vain. Chapter 1463. Under Lin Yu's terrifying spiritual force, His entire body, including his spiritual force, was being eroded. At this moment, there was nothing he could do to reverse the situation. It was difficult for him to form a final resistance. In the end, he staked everything on one throw, but he realized that he couldn't even self-destruct his spiritual force. "I am a sinner of the Sioux family," the second forefather sighed. He realized that his spiritual force was being devoured step by step. In the end, he was completely lost. Lin Yu had complete control over the second forefather of the Sioux family. At this moment, the second forefather opened his eyes. There was a hint of confusion in them, but they quickly became clear again. However, if one looked closely, they would notice that the second forefather's temperament seemed to be different. It seemed to be somewhat similar to Lin Yu. However, he was only in the initial adaptation period. Lin Yu was now controlling the second forefather to refine the remaining medicinal power in his body. His cultivation base naturally broke through to the third level. A powerful aura flowed out like a tide. He broke through. The Sioux family's current strength has reached another level. The Sioux family's third forefather was delighted. At the same time, he was also thinking about when he could break through to the third step. In the battle with Lin Yu in Royal City, the Sioux family's third forefather had injured his origin source. Even now, he still hadn't recovered. He couldn't help but frown slightly. Now that the Sioux family has a grade 8 alchemist, it won't be long before you can break through, said the Sioux family's great forefather. There was a gratified look in his eyes as he said, "You did the right thing this time." It was the Sioux family's third forefather who had brought back Lin Yu. At this moment, the great forefather was very happy. If Lin Yu was allowed to stay in the Sioux family for a period of time, he believed that there was hope for him to reach a higher level. 3 days passed. Why hasn't third brother come out yet? The great forefather could clearly sense that the second forefather had broken through to the third level. His aura was long and distant, and it should be very stable. "It's not a bad thing to break through a realm and settle down for a while," said the third forefather. However, if they knew the result inside, it would be hard for them to accept and despair. 7 days had passed. Lin Yu was constantly searching for useful information in the Sioux family ancestor's divine sense. It also allowed the second ancestor of the Sioux clan to gradually return to normal. As the Sioux family's second patriarch opened his eyes, there was a profound feeling in them. He opened the door to the place where he cultivated in seclusion and said with a smile, "Thank you, big brother and third brother, for protecting me. You broke through." The Sioux clan's third patriarch stepped forward to congratulate him. "I didn't let you down. It's all thanks to that pill." The Sioux family's second patriarch sighed. "The bottleneck of the second level has troubled me for a long time. Now I have finally broken through." The Sioux clan's second forefather was overjoyed. Indeed. The Sioux clan's third forefather nodded. However, this made them even more determined to keep Lin Yu here. "Do whatever it takes, even if we have to cripple him," the great ancestor said. The second forefather of the Sioux family smiled and said, "Of course." However, none of them noticed the sneer on the Sioux family's second forefather's lips. It made their hair stand on end. On Medicine Peak, Lin Yu breathed a long sigh of relief. Clearly, controlling his divine sense from a long distance took a lot out of him. The Spirit Spring is located in the Sioux clan's territory. Its origin is very mysterious. It was born between heaven and earth and seems to carry the great Tao. This is also the reason why the Sioux clan's 3 forefathers could recover so quickly from their injuries during the heavenly tribulation. Lin Yu pondered. However, there were restrictions set up by the Sioux clan's first forefather and a few of his friends. It could strangle everything. Even a cultivator of the 9th step might not be able to survive without permission. This was once the spirit spring left behind by a cultivator of the 10th step. Lin Yu obtained useful information from the second forefather's memories. It was also the most heavily guarded place in the Sioux clan. Apart from the great ancestor, no one could enter without permission. This involved an extremely deep secret. Even the second forefather didn't know. It seems that I still need some time to figure out the situation inside. Lin Yu sighed softly. However, he didn't show any anxiety. This matter concerned his breakthrough to the 9th step, so he couldn't be anxious. Now that Lin Yu had taken control of the second forefather, it would undoubtedly be much easier for him to do things in the future. If the great ancestor is also about to break through, that would be excellent, Lin Yu said. If the great ancestor broke through, he could also refine the same elixir. After taking control of the great ancestor, the entire Su clan would be his plaything. However, the Su clan's great ancestor had almost reached the end of his cultivation. If he didn't have a shocking divine item, it might be difficult for him to break through to a higher realm in his lifetime. If he really took out a shocking divine item, Lin Yu naturally wouldn't let him waste it. It was the right way to use it for his own advancement. At that moment, the Su clan's second forefather came to Lin Yu's residence. Although he told the great ancestor and the great ancestor that he was there to thank and monitor Lin Yu, at most, he was there to report the situation. After completely taking control of the Su clan's second forefather, Lin Yu understood the specifics of the Su clan. However, he still needed the second forefather to report the things that had happened recently. Half a month passed just like that. The Su clan began to worship their ancestors outside the clan ground. This was a good opportunity for Lin Yu. This time, he didn't accept the invitation and stayed on Medicine Peak. According to the third forefather, this was a matter of the Su clan. Lin Yu was just an outsider, so it was inconvenient for him to come. Lin Yu held an ancient book in his hand that recorded the life of the Su clan's first forefather. This was an extremely deep secret that even the younger generation of the Su clan didn't know. So this used to be the training ground of a 10th step powerhouse. Lin Yu knew the reason why the Su clan was established here. The Su clan's first forefather and 3 9th step cultivators discovered this place at the same time. However, later on, the Su clan's first forefather used some unknown method to kill the others and occupy this place for himself. The spirit spring was also left behind by a 10th step powerhouse. There was a terrifying ancient formation inside. Although it was incomplete, it was mostly repaired by the Su clan's first forefather and the other 9th step cultivators. At this time, the strength of the formation here had probably reached the peak of the 9th step. In the later stages, there was a world of difference between each level. Even now, Lin Yu was at the first level of the 8th step. Even if he could cross 2 levels and fight against a cultivator at the 3rd stage of the 8th step, he would need to use some methods to win. Lin Yu was helpless against a formation at the peak of the 9th step. This is... Lin Yu flipped to the last page. There was actually a record of the incomplete array formation here. Lin Yu smiled and said, "If we can comprehend this spell formation, the restrictive spell in the Su clan's ancestral land will be easily solved." He was well versed in alchemy, but he didn't know anything about formations. However, the more Lin Yu looked at the formation, the more familiar it seemed. "It's the pattern on the stone city in the land of reincarnation," Lin Yu said. He was very familiar with the pattern on the stone city. Although he had only seen it a few times, he had studied it carefully in the land of origin when he was cultivating. "Isn't this a coincidence?" Lin Yu asked with a smile. However, he didn't care so much now. As long as he could remove the formation of the Su clan grounds, there would be no threat here. Chapter 1464. Lin Yu went into seclusion. Although the formation was built based on the patterns on the stone city, it was different. Is this the technique of the 10th step in this world? Lin Yu was doubtful. The 10th step in this world was almost the same as the highest realm in the land of origin. However, Lin Yu didn't know why the 10th step in this world was still difficult to achieve eternal life and only had a lifespan of tens of thousands of years. He also didn't know why they all disappeared in the North Star Ancient Country. The number of 10th step existences in the North Star Ancient Country could be counted with one's fingers. It was all a mystery. Lin Yu thought of a possibility. Could it be that the 10th step experts had entered the land of origin or the world sea? After all, the supreme beings in the land of origin and the universe had discovered the mysterious reincarnation stone city. It wasn't impossible for the 10th step experts here to discover it. However, the supreme beings in the land of origin didn't have a deep understanding of the stone city because of the black calamity. Otherwise, they might have been able to explore this world when they came to the depths of the reincarnation road. Thinking of this, Lin Yu suddenly wanted to know how this world was related to the land of origin. He had plenty of time now. After asking the second ancestor to bring over many ancient books about this world, Lin Yu could sense that the 10th step powerhouses of the North Star Ancient Nation had appeared suddenly and disappeared just as suddenly. There were also records of those who had mastered the mysteries of time and space. The first emperor of the North Star Ancient Country was also at the 10th step, but he was still defeated. The mysteries of time and space. Lin Yu fell into deep thought. This world didn't pay attention to the cultivation of the Tao laws. Reaching the 10th step was already the pinnacle of the world and had an invincible aura. The usage of Tao laws in the land of origin and the universe was the most profound. Suddenly, Lin Yu seemed to have sensed something. According to what Lin Yu knew, only his first ancestor, Lin Yu, and himself had mastered the Tao laws of time and space. However, this was the first time he had come to this world. Naturally, it wouldn't be him. Could first ancestor have also come to this world back then? Lin Yu couldn't help but suspect. He had never thought about the connection between the land of origin and this world. When he saw the formation formed by the lines on the stone city, he was shocked. It was only then that he realized that perhaps a long, long time ago, there might have already been an utmost being who had comprehended the secrets of the path of reincarnation. Through the path of reincarnation, he had arrived at this place. If that was the case, then Lin Yu wasn't the first person to come to this universe. Could it be that there are still descendants of experts who came here from the land of origin? Lin Yu could not help but wonder. However, he had never seen anyone use the methods of the universe. This was inevitable. This was because the cultivation methods in this world were the result of countless years of survival of the fittest. However, if an utmost being were to come here, they would all be the founders of a single skill, and would possess an unimaginably horrifying might that could definitely be passed down. At this time, Lin Yu took out the jade palace he had obtained. He placed it in his hands. Now that he took a closer look, he could tell that even though the spacetime Tao laws on it originated from this world, they were somewhat different. From a certain point of view, it was more like the spacetime Tao laws of the universe that he belonged to. By now, Lin Yu was almost certain that there was definitely an utmost being who had stepped foot into this world before. It was just that they might have discovered something horrifying, or perhaps the black calamity had broken out in the land of origin. Hence, they had no choice but to retreat. This was also one of the reasons why there were 10th step powerful beings recorded in the ancient books that appeared and disappeared suddenly. Seems like the forbidden grounds of the great wilderness has the secrets of longevity passed down. Or perhaps it's referring to the land of origin. Lin Yu deduced after combining the ancient books and his own identity. However, the timing didn't seem to match. That was because the North Star Ancient Nation had only been established for hundreds of thousands of years. As for the age of the utmost being in the land of origin, it was hard to investigate. Back then, even the history books had not been created yet. Could it be that the flow of time in this world is much slower than in the land of origin or the universe? Lin Yu thought of a serious problem. He had spent a few years in the land of origin. Millions of years had already passed, perhaps even longer. Thinking of this, Lin Yu couldn't help but frown deeply. Before he died, there were already signs of the Black Calamity beginning. The 10 sovereigns of the strange creatures had almost awakened. If millions of years had passed, the land of origin and even the universe would have completely fallen. His old friends, Lin Yu cut off this thought. I have to go back as soon as possible. I might have to explore this world again in the future, Lin Yu said. He took out the array formation of the Su family. Now, half a month had passed. Lin Yu didn't sleep or rest. The Jade Palace was enlarged, and Lin Yu sat cross-legged in it. The entire courtyard was densely covered with restrictions set up by Lin Yu. Without his permission, no one was allowed to come close. A month had passed. Lin Yu used the power of his cultivation to carve out a series of mysterious runes in the air. These runes were very similar to the array patterns in the Su family. There are a total of 10 array cores. If I want to completely destroy them, I'm afraid it will take a year. Lin Yu thought. Thinking of the time, Lin Yu rejected this decision. He went into seclusion for another half a month. Several large flags appeared in his hand, and there were mysterious fluctuations on them. Take these flags and find an opportunity to place them on the array core of the array. Lin Yu ordered the second ancestor, who had already arrived. 2 days ago, the ancestor of the Su family was ready to ask Lin Yu to refine an 8th-grade elixir to make the ancestor's fate wheel younger. The herbs were very precious. It took half a month for the Su family to collect them. It's just in time to get the Su family's spirit spring, Lin Yu said. He had been in the Su family for nearly 2 months. It was time to draw in the net for all the arrangements. Lin Yu changed into a black robe, completely concealing his aura. He walked out of Medicine Peak. This was the first time he had walked out of Medicine Peak since he came to the Su family. Most of the time, he was under constant surveillance by the Su family members. This was because the elixir refinement this time was no small matter. In the previous elixir tribulation, the 3 ancestors of the Su family had already experienced the horror of it. Therefore, under the second ancestor's suggestion, Lin Yu could go to the periphery of the clan's land to refine the elixir. However, the condition was that Lin Yu had to refine the elixir in front of them. This was almost a threat. The ancestor's eyes were cold. This would have a huge impact on his future cultivation, and he could not afford to lose it. The clan's land was also very important. If Lin Yu was allowed to enter and something happened, the entire Su family would not be able to bear the consequences. The second ancestor's suggestion was Lin Yu's idea. At this moment, Lin Yu was still dressed in a black robe and came to the periphery of the ancestral land. Sir, please don't blame us. You know how important the ancestral land is to the Su family. The third ancestor of the Su family stepped forward and apologized. Lin Yu nodded lightly and said, "Didn't you want to use this opportunity to make me unable to refuse and let the alchemists of the Su family observe? Since the Su family wants to learn, then watch carefully," Lin Yu said lightly. The elixir that Lin Yu had personally chosen appeared in his hand. A few disciples of the Su family placed it on a jade plate on a platform in the ancestral land. "Second brother, why are you only here now?" The ancestor was dissatisfied. "It's about your breakthrough, so you're quite proactive. With the protection of the ancestral land, the elixir tribulation can't do anything. There's no problem with coming later," the second ancestor said with a smile. Chapter 1465. Lin Yu stepped into the clan grounds. He could clearly feel it. The great ancestor had already activated the formation. There was a terrifying fluctuation hidden underground. If Lin Yu had any strange movements, he could kill him at any time. Lin Yu did not care about these things. He looked at the medicinal herbs on the platform. Almost all of them were 7,000 to 8,000 years old. This was a pill to prolong one's life. In this world, It was almost heaven-defying to be able to remove the traces on the fate wheel. It would not be allowed to be born. Therefore, if the refinement was successful, the pill tribulation would be many times more terrifying than the pill tribulation of the Heaven Spirit pill. Life Origin pill? Lin Yu sneered. This pill was perfect for him. As Lin Yu used the universe fire, he slowly melted one of the herbs. He could clearly feel that a strong vitality was constantly emitting. Just a trace of it from the clan grounds was enough to make the disciples of the Su family, who were standing at the side, feel comfortable. It was as if their vitality had been awakened. Very quickly, the medicinal herbs turned into fine powder. Then, Lin Yu began to refine the second main herb. Su Yun stood respectfully at the side, constantly recording. He was born slow-witted, but he had a strong talent in the path of alchemy. Therefore, although he was shocked by some of Lin Yu's techniques, it was not to the point where he could not understand. This is definitely the legendary ancient technique. Su Yun was certain. He had joined the alchemy religion and became an outer sect elder for a period of time. Therefore, he was very clear about the history of alchemy. After seeing Lin Yu's technique, he was ecstatic. The ancient technique of alchemy was not mastered by anyone in the alchemy religion. This ancient technique only existed in the legends. Some people in the alchemy religion even guessed that this technique of alchemy did not exist. Lin Yu's technique was very mysterious. It was close to the Tao. Some laymen who did not understand alchemy felt that it had a kind of Tao. The technique can connect to the gods. Su Yun was excited. He thought of the last sentence of the ancient technique. Alchemy could open up the great Tao and achieve the Tao of alchemy. However, this was limited to ancient techniques, and had long been lost in the later generations. According to research, before the North Star ancient country was established, the ancient alchemy arts had already disappeared for countless years. It seemed that the experts who had reached the 10th step in alchemy had all disappeared in the long river of time. Su Yun thought of the records in the ancient books. Now, he was so excited that his whole body was trembling, almost losing his mind. He muttered in a low voice as he continued to approach Lin Yu. Su Yun, what are you doing? The Su family's third patriarch berated. If he were to enter while the Su family's array formation was activated, it would be no different from sending him to his death. When Su Yun was refining pills, no one in the entire Su family could be seen. He was given high hope. Later on, he even had to obtain Lin Yu's alchemy skills. From then on, the Su family flourished. The Su family's third ancestor sent him flying with a slap. Su Yun was almost bewitched. The ancient technique was a magical technique that every alchemist dreamed of. Now that it had appeared in front of him, how could he not be excited? Even though he was sent flying by the third ancestor, he immediately got up. Although he did not continue to move forward, his hand continued to record. He did not want to miss a single detail. Lin Yu continued to smelt the herbs. In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. The refining of the life origin pill was no small matter. Even Lin Yu did not have it easy. 3 days was only enough to extract the pure substance within. In front of Lin Yu, the alchemy cauldron was no longer that important. To be more precise, under Lin Yu's continuous refining, the cauldron could no longer withstand it and exploded with a loud bang. The Su family's third ancestor could not help but sweat. Even an outsider would know the danger of a cauldron exploding during alchemy. If it was light, the cauldron would fail. If it was heavy, the cauldron would be destroyed and the alchemist would die. However, Lin Yu did not care much. Under his terrifying divine thought, the fragments of the cauldron were imprisoned and floated in the void. Then, Lin Yu controlled the fusion of the pure substance of the elixir with one hand and used the universe fire with the other to construct a new alchemy cauldron. Divine technique. The Su family's third ancestor was shocked. They now realized that Lin Yu's combat strength was probably not low. He was not the weak alchemist they knew. With a wave of Lin Yu's hand, the pure substance of several elixir pills appeared in the cauldron constructed with universe fire. The universe fire cauldron was densely covered with runes. At this time, Lin Yu was so focused that he forgot about everything around him. He cultivated the Great Void 8 steps and could enter the Tao enlightenment state at any time. At this moment, he was like a banished immortal, sitting cross-legged in front of the alchemy cauldron. Even if one could not see his true appearance, it was still moving. As time continued to pass, 7 days passed in a flash. The embryonic form of the elixir had already appeared. Multicolored light appeared here, and endless vitality appeared in the clan land. All kinds of strange phenomena appeared one after another. On the ground, builder wood and jade grass appeared, and they were growing rapidly. Su Yun was at the side. He had not slept or rested for the past few days. He was so focused that his divine thought was on the verge of collapse. He relied on the elixir to prolong his life. A peerless elixir. I'm afraid that even the patriarch of the alchemy school would find it difficult to refine such an elixir. Su Yun whispered. When the Su family's patriarch heard Su Yun's words, he was even more shocked. The Su family's third ancestor muttered proudly, "It seems that my judgment was right this time." The value of an alchemist who surpassed the patriarch of the alchemy school was immeasurable. He probably had a terrifying influence even in the imperial capital of Gaochen. If he wanted to, it would be easy for him to establish a force that was on par with the alchemy school. The more it was so, the happier the Su family's third ancestor was. However, at this moment, the Su family's great ancestor voiced his concern. If his talent in alchemy is so terrifying, I wonder if we have the ability to keep him? At all costs. The third ancestor said faintly. Since such an alchemist was already in the Su family, there was no need for him to leave. Why don't we activate the Great Formation now and keep him here forever? He'll become our exclusive property, the Su family's third ancestor suggested. Let him finish refining the elixir now, the great ancestor said. After all, this was related to whether or not they could restore their vitality. If they could continue their path forward. After seeing Lin use alchemy skills, the two Su family's patriarchs could already foresee the future of the Su family. Even they themselves might be able to live in the Su family for a long time and witness the Su family's prosperity. A total of half a month passed. The medicinal fragrance of the elixir had spread throughout the Su family grounds. Every wisp of it that spread out strengthened the vitality of the Su family's disciples. This was almost like a miracle, causing everyone to be shocked. Boom! The lightning tribulation of heaven and earth formed in an instant. However, with the Great Formation blocking it, no matter how terrifying the pill tribulation was, it didn't have much of an effect. The pill tribulation lasted for 3 days. Lin Yu stood on the platform unperturbed. Until the tribulation dispersed. Lin Yu pocketed the elixir that emitted white light. What is the meaning of this, sir? The Su family's great ancestor asked. Chapter 1466. Lin Yu looked at the Su family's great ancestor indifferently and said coldly, "Do you think I don't know what the Su family is thinking? You are a bunch of ambitious wolves." The Su family's great ancestor and third ancestor's expressions changed when they heard this. However, the third ancestor reacted quickly and immediately said, "Sir, you are overthinking. We have never had any other thoughts about you. If you have any misunderstandings in your heart, just say it. The Su family will definitely not treat you unfairly." The third ancestor's smile was like a spring breeze, but Lin Yu did not buy it. Lin Yu only sneered and sat down on the ground. He said indifferently, "Come on, tell me how the Su family will not treat me unfairly." Why are you telling him this? He is now in the Su family's territory. He is just a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. If you hand over the elixir pill now and swear to serve the Su family in the future, perhaps you will suffer less. the Su family's great ancestor said coldly. Now that they saw Lin Yu's attitude, they did not need to continue pretending. They directly said what they had been thinking all along. Not bad, not bad. Lin Yu had been waiting for the Su family's great ancestor to say this for a long time. He said, "Are you finally ready to shed all pretense of cordiality?" "So what if I am?" the Su family's great ancestor said coldly. The Su family's territory lit up. Runes appeared in the void and the earth rumbled. The sky seemed to have begun to tilt under the power of the Su family's territory. "You still have one last chance," the Su family's third ancestor reminded him. "After the Great Array is activated, even if you know many powerhouses, they will not be able to save you." Lin Yu did not say anything. He just looked at the opening of the array indifferently. He had already prepared himself and said, "In that case, I don't need to hold back anymore." Lin Yu's hand lit up. Several array cores of the Great Array actually showed signs of collapsing. "What's going on?" The Su family's great ancestor was shaken back a few steps. The upper echelons of the Su family were all extremely shocked. The clan's land had been immortal since ancient times, and it was related to a powerhouse at the 10th step. There was absolutely no accident. However, at this time there were actually signs of instability. "Third brother, he left something in the clan. Quickly come forward and stabilize the formation with me." The Su grand ancestor stabilized his body and directly flew into the sky. However, at that moment, the Su family's second patriarch appeared behind the grand patriarch and pierced him with his sword. The grand ancestor was in disbelief as he looked at the sword that pierced through his chest. Blood dripped onto the ground. "Second brother, what is the meaning of this?" the grand ancestor murmured. His life force was rapidly fading away. The second patriarch of the Su family was holding Lin Yu's stone sword. This was an irreversible trend of obliterating his Tao fruit and origin. "Second brother, you're crazy." The third patriarch stepped forward, wanting to knock the second patriarch away. However, the second patriarch was not afraid at all. He raised his stone sword and slashed at the grand ancestor. Immediately after, it turned into a huge cauldron. Genesis Chi transformed into a raging fire that burned in the sky. Some of the members of the Su family looked at the scene in the sky with disbelief. They did not understand why their own patriarchs would kill each other at this time. After the second patriarch defeated the third patriarch, the clan's land had been affected. It was difficult for the grand ancestor to recover. He could only use his endless source to reconstruct his body with great difficulty. "He's already been controlled." The Su family's grand ancestor finally understood. He thought of the heavenly spirit pill that Lin Yu had refined for the third patriarch not long ago. "We've been tricked." That person refined a pill with a trick. "The second patriarch is now under his control," said the grand ancestor. During their first exchange, he had already sensed that the second patriarch's aura seemed to have changed. After all, they had been together for so long that even the slightest change in the other's aura would be noticed. However, the second patriarch had been hiding very deeply under Lin Yu's control during this period. As a result, he was only discovered now. "Master, the Su family's grand ancestor is seriously injured. Please give me your instructions." The second patriarch came before Lin Yu in a very respectful manner. The grand ancestor stared at the second patriarch and slowly said, "It seems that the accident in the ancestral land has something to do with you." None of them had expected this to happen. They had been scheming against Lin Yu all along, but now the entire Su family had been tricked. The third patriarch was filled with grief and indignation. He was the one who had brought Lin Yu here, but now such an accident had happened. "Big brother, use all the power in the ancestral land," shouted the third patriarch. All the power in his body was poured into the grand ancestor's body, allowing him to recover to his peak. "It's too late." Lin Yu waved his hand, gesturing for the second patriarch to kill the third patriarch. He stood up calmly and formed a seal. The array flags that the second patriarch had placed in each array core exploded with dazzling light. The array pattern's radiance reached its peak and then dimmed until the very end. Even though the Grand Ancestor was sweating all over, he still could not neutralize Lin Yu's method. The place returned to silence once more. Lin Yu's plan had been foolproof during this period of time. "Who the hell are you?" The Grand Ancestor was retreating. If he continued to control the array, he might suffer a backlash and die in the end. "Me? I'm your third brother. You should know me." Lin Yu slowly took off his black robe, revealing his handsome face. His face was as sharp as a knife, and his eyebrows were like swords. He looked very young. Lin Yu! The third patriarch was shocked. He would never forget this face for the rest of his life. In the Fuho royal city, Lin Yu had left a deep impression on him. Even now, the memory was still fresh in his mind. After all, he had almost been killed by Lin Yu. But now, he also understood that perhaps it wasn't that Lin Yu had failed to kill him, but that he had deliberately let him go. When the third patriarch realized this, his expression changed drastically. "So you've been plotting this all along?" Lin Yu shook his head. "To be precise, I didn't mean to do that if you didn't tell me about the Su family's divine treasury." The third patriarch's face was slightly pale. His strength was inferior to the second patriarch's to begin with. While being suppressed and distracted by his conversation with Lin Yu, his chest was almost shattered, and he kept retreating. "You're Lin Yu?" The Grand Ancestor was clearly stunned for a while. He muttered in a low voice, as if he was talking to himself, but also as if he was questioning Lin Yu. Their expressions turned solemn. From the third patriarch's words, they all knew how terrifying Lin Yu was. Even when besieged by 5 8th-step cultivators, he was still calm and collected as he killed them all. Moreover, in a few days, his cultivation had skyrocketed by 2-step. His combat strength was incomparably terrifying. Now, coupled with his identity as an alchemist, the third patriarch didn't dare to think about it. Before attacking Lin Yu, the third patriarch had an accurate understanding of Lin Yu's background, but he didn't get an accurate answer. However, there was one possibility. Lin Yu came from an extremely powerful hidden faction. This was inevitable. Otherwise, Lin Yu couldn't have gone from the 6th step to the 8th step in such a short time. "Lin Yu, how dare you come to the Su family? I'll crush your bones and scatter your ashes," the third patriarch shouted. He wanted to kill Lin Yu, but in the end, he was stopped by the second patriarch. Due to the restriction of his cultivation, the third patriarch was being suppressed again and again. Before long, he was covered in blood. Chapter 1467. Lin Yu also stood up at this time. Now, the Su family's ancestral ground had lost its effectiveness. For Lin Yu, this was the only threat, and it was no longer of any use. He slowly stood up. Unparalleled power erupted from his body, and with a wave of pressure, he directly locked onto the Su family's Grand Ancestor. He would not have the slightest bit of emotion for someone who had always been hostile to him and wanted to use him. "You are indeed at the 8th step. In terms of combat strength, you are already comparable to us," said the Su family's Grand Ancestor. Even though he had already heard about it from the third ancestor, he was still shocked when he saw Lin Yu's true body. He didn't expect that a person who didn't look old would have a combat strength that was on par with him. At this point, the Grand Ancestor had no choice but to fight. Lin Yu used the array flag to seal the place, so that the Su family's disciples who were far away couldn't detect the specific situation. No one knew what was going to happen. Lin Yu directly made his move. The Grand Ancestor was guarding against Lin Yu's universe fire, and had been staring at Lin Yu's hand. However, his defense was useless against Lin Yu. His universe fire and burial ice were in his eyes, and nothing could escape his gaze. When universe fire and burial ice appeared at the same time, the Grand Ancestor had almost no room to resist. Without the protection of the ancestral ground, the Grand Ancestor was injured by a sneak attack, and now he had no room to resist. As he turned into a cauldron, it shook heaven and earth. Universe fire and burial ice surrounded him. The void of heaven and earth was melted, and it was constantly collapsing. The cauldron that the Grand Ancestor had turned into was constantly screaming, and he couldn't even resist. After a quarter of an hour, he turned into dust and completely died. When the Sioux family's third ancestor saw this scene, his heart was filled with grief. He couldn't help but roar, "I am the sinner of the Sioux family. I invited the wolf into the house." He looked at Lin Yu with killing intent. However, the Sioux family's third patriarch also realized that the Sioux family might already be finished. Looking at the Grand Ancestor's death, he was in despair. He thought back to everything that happened in Fu Ho country. If only he didn't find trouble with Lin Yu then, how good would that be? But there was no medicine for regret in the world. The three ancestors of the Sioux family had lived for so many years, and they were now considered powerhouses. I hope that you can spare the innocent members of the Sioux family. They have no idea about all of this, said the Sioux family's third forefather. Without waiting for Lin Yu's reply, he directly transformed into Tao. His body began to dissipate in the sky. In the end, he died completely. In order to convince Lin Yu to spare the entire Sioux family, he decisively committed suicide. Lin Yu looked at the scene indifferently. He had experienced so many things and was used to seeing life and death. However, he didn't intend to kill the innocent. Many members of the Sioux family didn't know about this. Lin Yu left the rest to the second patriarch. As for those who should be killed and could pose a threat to Lin Yu, he didn't intend to let any of them go. After everything was settled, Lin Yu went to the depths of the Sioux family's land. The clan land had experienced tens of millions of years, and there were many rare immortal herbs and strange plants. Birds sang, flowers bloomed, and water gurgled. It was like a paradise on earth. The Genesis Chi here had reached a point where it couldn't be dispersed. Mortals who took a whiff would feel as if they had ascended to immortality, and their lifespan would be prolonged. However, the current rich Genesis Chi didn't have much effect on Lin Yu. The Sioux family's land was huge, like a small world. This was the power of a 10th step expert. A 10th step expert is already a top existence in this world. It's just that their mighty power doesn't seem to be as great as when they were in the land of origin. Lin Yu could clearly feel this. However, there was no doubt that in this world, those who could reach the 10th step were all top experts. This was because even if a 10th step expert was already a supreme existence in the universe and was immortal and indestructible, in this world, they only had a lifespan of tens of thousands of years. It was difficult for them to live forever. It should be said that it took Lin Yu tens of thousands of years to reach the realm of cutting Tao. In this world, the 10th step might not be considered the top. This was enough to show how terrifying this world was. After spending an hour, Lin Yu arrived at the location of the spirit spring that the Sioux family's third patriarch had mentioned. At the end of a small river, there was a spring that was filled with rich Genesis Chi. However, there seemed to be some kind of Tao law that was similar to the Tao law of reincarnation that Lin Yu had mastered. However, Lin Yu couldn't tell the difference. He arrived at the location of the spring. No wonder the Sioux family could endure for so long and stand tall in the Gauchian ancient nation for tens of thousands of years, Lin Yu muttered. Just a single Genesis I was enough to create an immortal force. The Sioux family's development was still lagging behind. After all, who knew how many experts they could create with just one Genesis I? Lin Yu had now achieved his goal. He looked indifferently at the spring, which emitted a supreme aura. Lin Yu was sure that this was definitely a divine object left behind by a 10th step expert. However, he didn't know why the 10th step expert had left the spirit spring here in the end. Lin Yu sat cross-legged on the side of the spring, constantly guiding the aura here into his body. However, he wasn't in a hurry to absorb all of the spring. Although the spirit spring could support him to the 9th step, it was obviously not the best time. He still needed some time to settle down. Lin Yu took out the elixir that he had just refined. Although the Heavenly Fate elixir was mainly used to increase one's lifespan and repair one's fate wheel, it was still an 8th step elixir after all. In a certain aspect, it could even be compared to a 9th grade elixir. One of its uses was to consolidate one's strength and make one's body flawless, regardless of whether it was one's cultivation, spirit consciousness, or realm. This was also why the Su family's great ancestor didn't hesitate to pay a huge price to refine the Heavenly Fate elixir. This was because the great ancestor was already old and didn't have much time left. He needed to use the Heavenly Fate elixir to increase his lifespan and refine his realm so that he could break through to a higher realm. However, all of this was just a wedding dress for Lin Yu. Lin Yu looked indifferently at the elixir in his hand. After settling down his aura, he didn't hesitate to consume the Heavenly Fate elixir. The Tao induction scripture circulated in his body and quickly absorbed and refined the elixir. In just a short moment, Lin Yu's body was covered with a layer of milky white frost that contained a dense life aura. Lin Yu's life aura was like a rainbow that appeared in the clan's land and illuminated the endless land. By now, Lin Yu had already taken full control of the Su family's territory by using the array flags. As Lin Yu started to cultivate, he looked at the array formation again. Without Lin Yu's permission, no one could get close to this place. Even though the formation left behind by a 10th step powerhouse was incomplete, it was still something that no one in the North Star ancient nation could destroy. Even a 9th step powerhouse wouldn't be able to do anything to Lin Yu, who was in the Su family's land. Chapter 1468. After a month, Lin Yu's aura became more and more stable. The milky white frost on his body gradually dissipated. At this time, he was dressed in black. His face was calm and emotionless, like a god from the underworld. Now, he had completely stabilized his realm at the 8th step. "It's time to completely refine the spirit spring here," Lin Yu said calmly. The power in the spirit spring was very majestic. It made people feel weak and powerless as if they were looking at the sky. The Su family did not have the scripture of Tao induction. Therefore, even if the 3 ancestors of the Su family could use this place to cultivate, it was very difficult to completely refine this place. It was almost impossible. In the past, they had tried many times, but in the end, they had all returned without success. They had no choice but to use the aura of this place to cultivate. This was also why the Su family could still be so prosperous and give birth to 3 cultivators at the 8th step, even without the existence of an alchemist. At this time, Lin Yu was looking at the scripture of Tao induction. At the same time, he used the devouring starry sky. His body seemed to be evolving into a mysterious black hole in the universe. The power above the spirit spring was constantly being eroded by Lin Yu and entered into the black hole. After being refined, it became pure power and was constantly injected into Lin Yu's body. The power in Lin Yu's body was increasing at a speed visible to the naked eye. In just a few days, Lin Yu once again stepped into the 2nd level of the 8th step. Lin Yu did not stop. The devouring starry sky and the scripture of Tao induction were fully activated. The power above the spirit spring was constantly being drawn out. As Lin Yu continued to absorb, mysterious runes appeared here. They kept circling around Lin Yu, containing Tao and truth, intertwining in the void. A year passed like this. At this time, the spirit spring was gradually drying up. The power in Lin Yu's body made the entire Su family tremble. Above the sky, lightning intertwined. This was a sign that he was about to break through. As the spirit spring completely dimmed, Lin Yu broke through to the true 9th step. At that moment, the dried-up spirit spring began to collapse and gradually disappeared from the world. The Su family's ancestral land had become a wasteland. Lin Yu slowly opened his eyes. Now, he had completely broken through to the 9th step. With a wave of his hand, boundless might was contained within it. The thunderclouds in the sky directly dissipated. Then, he reached out with his 5 fingers and grabbed at the void. Chains of divine gold appeared in the air above the Su family estate. Walala, it emitted a power that made one's heart palpitate. There's no need to hide it anymore, Lin Yu said faintly. In the past year, he had gradually discovered that there seemed to be an extremely well-hidden aura here. However, Lin Yu was in the midst of a breakthrough, so he didn't care much about it. The void collapsed as a coffin appeared at the end of the chains of divine gold. The aura of decay exuded from it, but it was also a frightening sight to behold. But for Lin Yu, it was a frightening sight. The frightening power didn't come from within, but from the coffin itself. The Su family's first ancestor, Lin Yu nonchalantly stated the identity of the creature hidden within. Bang! The coffin opened, and the living being lying inside sat up. Only skin and bones remained. It seemed to have decayed, but his aura was still powerful. He was a powerhouse of the 9th step. Moreover, he'd been at the 9th step for an unknown period of time. Based on the time, the Su family's first ancestor had lived for over 30,000 years. This was unimaginable for this world. 30,000 years was enough to witness the change of eras. It was unknown how many dynasties had perished during this period of time. I didn't expect you to discover me. All my efforts were in vain, the Su family's first ancestor spoke. He murmured weakly, as if his life force had been exhausted during this period of time. Now, he was only left with a single breath. Every word he spoke was a great torment. You're a man of great courage, Lin Yu said faintly. You want to use the remains of a powerhouse of the 10th step here to break through the final step. You don't even care about the death of your own descendant. Lin Yu had long known the true face of this place. This was the place where a powerhouse of the 10th step transformed. It seemed that this powerhouse of the 10th step had gained enlightenment and stepped into a second life, so he'd sealed his remains here. After the Su family's first ancestor had discovered this, he'd studied it for an unknown period of time. In the end, he hadn't hesitated to kill his good friends. He'd allowed himself to occupy this place. Sigh, I've failed in the end, the Su family's ancestor said. He didn't seem to have the slightest hatred for Lin Yu. Even if Lin Yu didn't make a move, the Su family's ancestor could only pass away in a coffin. He couldn't even come out to the world. I want to know what the problem is. There's clearly the Tao law and power of the 10th step here. In the end, the Su family's ancestor's sunken eyes looked at the sky and said, Now that I'm about to pass away, my descendants do deserve to die for provoking a powerhouse like you. You should leave. I don't want to kill you. Even though the Su family's ancestor was about to pass away, he was still in the late stage of the 9th step. If he wanted to kill Lin Yu at all costs, it wouldn't be impossible. However, a dying man's words were kind. He'd been unhindered for his entire life. Now that he was in his twilight years, he didn't want to care about these things. Tens of thousands of years ago, he was also a genius of his generation. Even in the entire North Star ancient nation, no one could compare to him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to break through to the 9th step and establish the immortal Su family. However, he was about to pass away. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Only Lin Yu knew. Powerhouses at the 10th step need to take their own step. They can't break through by relying on the comprehension and legacy of their ancestors, Lin Yu said indifferently. Is that so? The Su family's ancestors seemed to have understood something. After an unknown period of time, he couldn't help but laugh. So that's how it is, that's how it is. My path has always been wrong. Although Lin Yu's words weren't wrong, They undoubtedly denied everything about the Su family's ancestor. Now that he heard Lin Yu's words, he understood and couldn't help but laugh heartily. His aura was constantly dissipating, and his physical body was turning into ashes that kept fluttering in the sky. Before the Su family's ancestor dissipated, he looked at Lin Yu as if he was fulfilling his last wish. It seems that you've reached this step before. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to say those words. Then, have you understood your own path? The Su family's ancestor looked at Lin Yu. Even though he was about to pass away, he still looked at Lin Yu with a terrifying pressure. His path was wrong, but he was truly at the late stage of the 9th step, which was the perfect state. There were many bones on the path of cultivation. Looking at the Su family's ancestor, Lin Yu nodded and said, "I've understood." "What path is it?" the Su family's ancestor continued to ask. The Su family's ancestor was obsessed with cultivation. He didn't hesitate to abandon everything. Even when he was about to die, he still wanted to understand cultivation. "Reincarnation," Lin Yu replied indifferently. "Reincarnation. Reincarnation. What a great reincarnation. Powerhouses who can reach the 10th step are all amazing talents who can dominate an era. It seems that I haven't reached your realm yet." Before he could finish speaking, the Su family's ancestor completely disappeared from the world. Chapter 1469. After Lin Yu watched the Su family's great ancestor disappear, he stood there quietly for a while. Then, he did not stay any longer and directly walked out of the Su family's territory. To Lin Yu, there was nothing worth staying in the Su family now. The Su family's second forefather had already purged the entire Su family. "Master, the things you asked for have been done," the Su family's second forefather said. Although the Su family's snail pillar was now under Lin Yu's control, it still had its own divine consciousness and judgment. It was not fundamentally a puppet. "From now on, you will be the helmsman of the Su family. When I need you, I will look for you," Lin Yu said faintly. He did not know how long he would have to stay in this world, so it was not a bad thing to have his own power. After all, there was a limit to one's energy. "Yes." The Su family's second forefather knelt on the ground. Now that the entire Su family's changes had been sealed, no one knew what had happened. Even some members of the Su family who knew about it had their memories wiped. The Su family's second forefather had now completely become Lin Yu's servant. As long as the Su family's second forefather did not break through to the 10th step, he would not be able to escape from Lin Yu's control. Therefore, Lin Yu did not have much to worry about when he left. Now that he was an expert at the 9th step, he was already at the top of the entire Gauchan ancient nation. Even some of the great ancestors of the major forces might not be his match. No one could threaten him. However, the most important problem now was that after reaching the 9th step, Lin Yu had reached a bottleneck. Although the Tao induction scripture was very profound, Lin Yu's progress was too fast. In just a few years, he had already surpassed 99% of the people in this world. It was a height that they would not be able to reach in their lifetime. Therefore, Lin Yu seemed to be unable to see any way out. This also meant that he needed some time to settle down. He was not anxious. On the path of cultivation, one should guard against arrogance and impatience. Although he knew that his time was tight, he was not in a hurry to find the next breakthrough. He returned to the country of Hu. The pavilion master of the Tianji pavilion was with Sheng. Now, Crow had also awakened. Lin Yu came to the rundown town and saw that the three people seemed to be discussing something. They all frowned. It was as if this matter was of utmost importance to them. Even the pavilion master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion, who was usually in charge of strategizing, couldn't help but frown deeply. When they saw Lin Yu's arrival, they couldn't help but reveal a look of joy. "Lin Yu, you're finally back." Xing stepped forward with a joyful expression. Strings of beings of his cultivation realm reaching his being cultivation realms of his cultivation realm. He could not help but murmured the shocks's, his of cultivations of him could not. Munadov of course. His. Of. Even though Lin Yu did not deliberately reveal his cultivation realm, when Xing stood in front of him, it was as if he was facing a vast expanse of heaven. It gave people a feeling of fear, as if they could not bear this power and wanted to kneel down. The ninth step. Crow saw through Lin Yu's cultivation realm with a single glance. He could not help but turn pale with fright. Monster! Monster! He no longer knew what words to use to describe Lin Yu. He could only think of those two words. The pavilion master of the Tianji pavilion only nodded. Xing said regretfully, "If I had known that the Su family had such a treasure trove, I would have gone with you." Lin Yu smiled but did not say anything. The Su family has stood tall in the North Star ancient nation for tens of thousands of years. Its foundation is naturally terrifying. The dangers it contains are also unimaginable. Lin Yu was able to obtain such a fortune by relying on his own methods, said the pavilion master of the Tianji pavilion. He did not seem surprised by Lin Yu's cultivation realm. After all, Lin Yu had been personally appointed by the acting divine master. Crow looked at Lin Yu as well, her eyes filled with doubt. "You are really too similar to that person," Crow could not help but say. Lin Yu was also guessing that the person Crow was talking about was the one who had founded the Tianji organization. The Tianji organization could be traced back countless years. It was very likely that the Tianji organization's first divine master was his first ancestor, Lin Xian. More than one person had said that he looked very similar to the first ancestor, Lin Xian. Lin Yu had already guessed this in his heart. Perhaps his first ancestor had already come here a long time ago and left behind the Divine Court organization. However, Lin Yu did not know the purpose of the first ancestor's first ancestor leaving the Tianji organization behind. After all, according to his guess, the God's Court organization might still have a 10th step expert. Why didn't Lin Xian bring such a powerful force back to the origin of the God's Court so many years ago? It was very likely that this would change the entire battle situation. This was something that Lin Yu needed to understand. "What were you guys discussing just now?" Lin Yu could not help but ask. He had already sensed the nervousness of the three people. As a member of the Tianji organization, he naturally had the responsibility to ask about these things. There are strange changes in the unknown lands outside the North Star ancient nation. It seems that a ruin has been opened. The acting divine master of the Tianji organization has already entered that place. However, he is surrounded and there is no news of him now, said the pavilion master of the Tianji pavilion. Unknown lands, acting divine master. Lin Yu muttered softly and said, "Since that's the case, let's go and assist the acting divine master." Lin Yu suggested. He had already broken through to the 9th step. There were only a few people or things in the entire North Star ancient nation that could threaten him. Therefore, Lin Yu said directly. Lin Yu also wanted to know about the unknown lands that they had repeatedly mentioned. He wanted to know what was inside. There are countless experts in our Heavenly Saints organization. If we really join forces, I'm afraid the entire North Star ancient nation will be overturned. However, they all have urgent matters to attend to, so they can't leave. Now, the only way is for us to go, said the pavilion master of the Tianji pavilion. Back then, he was also a 9th step expert. However, for some unknown reason, he was severely injured and his realm dropped. However, he did not lose his insight. Now, the only way was for the few of them to go and assist. Lin Yu could also find out some things that he wanted to know from the acting divine master. With that said, the few of them set off. The pavilion master of the Tianji pavilion took out a piece of talisman paper. As he blew on it, it expanded to a size of 100 feet. There were talismans imprinted on it. The talisman paper was filled with dense spatial energy. The few of them stepped onto the talisman paper and headed towards the west of the North Star ancient nation. Those factions are ambitious. They took advantage of the time when the acting Divine Master was opening the ruins to launch a sneak attack. They caused the acting Divine Master to be severely injured. When Xing heard the news, he was furious. Originally, they were still worried that it would be futile for them, the Pavilion Master of the Tianji Pavilion, and Crow to reach the unknown lands. However, with Lin Yu, who had broken through to the 9th step, the situation was undoubtedly much better. Only a few days had passed. Lin Yu and the few of them stepped through the ancient gate that was built by the Divine Court organization. In just 3 days, they had arrived at the border of the North Star ancient nation. Chapter 1470. They could see the endless eternal night in the distance. Not a single ray of light could be seen. It was as if there was no sun or stars. There was no light at all. Even the chi of the Great Path was difficult to manifest. Lin Yu and the others stood on the city wall and looked into the distance. They were very calm. This is the land of eternal night. It has never seen sunlight, the Pavilion Master said. This place has a huge suppression on cultivators. Perhaps a 9th step cultivator would only be able to exert the strength of a 6th step cultivator. There is also a kind of creature here that devours living things. It is called the Void. The Pavilion Master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion said, "This used to be a graveyard. An unimaginable battle took place here, and countless experts were buried here. Just the periphery alone has countless experts at the 10th step. I don't know which era they were born from." The Pavilion Master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion said slowly. Could there have been an existence that surpassed the 10th step here? Lin Yu couldn't help but ask. In his opinion, the 10th step was the peak existence. As far as he knew, the Tao Severing Realm was already the highest level. Only the legendary god of creation could possibly surpass this realm. However, based on what the Pavilion Master of the Divine Secret Pavilion had said, it seemed like there had once been an existence that surpassed the 10th step in this world. This was undoubtedly subversive to Lin Yu. It was beyond his understanding. It's very likely. The Pavilion Master said directly, however, only the acting Divine Master and a few others might know a little about this. Speaking of this, Lin Yu couldn't help but feel a ripple in his heart. The level of mystery of this world seemed to have exceeded Lin Yu's imagination. However, the most important thing now is to rescue the acting Divine Master and the others and eliminate all the forces that attacked our Divine Court, the Pavilion Master said. In response, the others nodded one after another. However, this was the most important thing now. The acting Divine Master and the others were now seriously injured and were in the ruins. No one knew whether they were alive or dead. Let those forces know what it means to not touch them. Xing Lu's eyes revealed a clear murderous intent. That relic was discovered by our Divine Court for countless years. However, the seal only loosened slightly in the current era. However, it has been coveted by several other forces for a long time. I didn't expect them to dare to do such a thing, said the Pavilion Lord of the Divine Secret Pavilion. Kill them all, including the forces behind them. Crow said, although the Divine Court has declined in this world, it is not something that a force in this small place can offend. The few of them jumped off the city wall and stepped into the darkness. When Lin Yu arrived here, he couldn't help but feel a sense of familiarity. Lin Yu couldn't help but frown. This place seems to be very similar to the ancestral land in the Land of Origin. This discovery was undoubtedly terrifying for Lin Yu. It seems that the origin ground has a lot to do with this place, Lin Yu muttered. This was something he needed to discover. He wanted to know how this place was related to the Land of Origin. This would be of great benefit to him when he went to the Land of Origin and fought against the strange creatures. After Lin Yu and the others set foot in this place, All they could see was darkness and ruins everywhere. It seemed that this place was once a continuous building that was very ancient. The specific age could no longer be determined. I'm afraid that the age of the buildings here has spanned several eras. It was Xing's first time coming to the unknown place. At this time, looking at the ruins, he couldn't help but be surprised. How many eras? Little kid, go back and read more ancient books. Otherwise, when you go out, people will say that the people of the divine court have no knowledge, Crow said disdainfully. He scolded Xing without giving him any face. Then tell me, which era is this building from? Xing was not to be outdone. The unknown place was incomparably mysterious. In the ancient books there were only a few records. It wasn't that Xing didn't know about it, but he had never obtained any useful information. It's true that the age of this place can't be determined. However, the ruins left here are definitely not as simple as a few eras ago, Crow said. Do you know why this place is called the Land of Evernight? Xing shook his head. Although he was very stubborn, he knew very little about the Land of Evernight. He almost didn't have a specific understanding. This used to be a graveyard. Countless years ago, this was the place where the bones of experts were buried. Therefore, after being infected by the aura of countless experts, this place entered the Land of Evernight. There is no trace of sunlight, Crow said slowly. He seemed to be reminiscing. TSK, I know that too. After hearing Crow's words, Xing just shook his head in disdain. I haven't finished speaking. Little kid, don't disturb me, Lu Yu continued. In response, Lin Yu and the Pavilion of Divination listened carefully. They knew very little about the Land of Evernight. They all knew that Crow's origin was extremely ancient. He definitely wasn't talking nonsense when he mentioned the Land of Evernight. The North Star ancient country is just a small place. It's just a continent formed by the Land of Evernight. The vastness of this world is far beyond your imagination. Crow mentioned the structure of this world for the first time. However, from his tone, it seemed like the North Star ancient country was just a grain of rice to him. Lu Yu seemed to have seen a much bigger place. The formation of the Land of Evernight is even more ancient than the birth of the Divine Court. It has a huge connection with two supreme powers. However, knowing so much now is obviously not good for you guys. Crow didn't continue. However, from Lu Yu's tone, Lin Yu and the rest got some useful information. The Land of Evernight was actually formed by the war between two supreme powers. What kind of power could cause such destruction? This is a graveyard. At the same time, it's also a place for refining corpses. Legend has it that in a certain era, the experts buried here would revive and reappear in the world, Crow said faintly. Just as the few of them were discussing as they walked, a sudden change occurred. In one of the ruins, a few gray auras suddenly appeared, bringing with them an ominous power. A strange roar was heard. The gray auras quickly condensed into a few indescribable things. When they saw Lin Yu and the rest, they immediately pounced on them. Their fangs were deep and their fingernails were like sharp blades. The ground was like tofu that was cut open. These indescribable things each had the strength of a sixth-step cultivator. Right now, their cultivation bases were being suppressed. At most, they could only display the strength of a sixth-step cultivator. Lin Yu took a step forward without the slightest hesitation. However, when he used his cultivation base, he discovered something miraculous. His cultivation base did not seem to be suppressed to the sixth step like the pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion had said. He could still use the strength of a seventh-step cultivator. However, he didn't show it too much. This was just the strength of a sixth-step cultivator. To Lin Yu, even if he used his sixth-step cultivation, it was still a piece of cake. However, the strange auras on them were a little troublesome. If they were tainted, they might be in trouble. Chapter 1471. The surrounding environment was the best proof. It could be seen that the moment those indescribable things appeared, the surrounding land was corroded and turned into ashes, carrying some kind of polluting property. These ruins are the condensation of the negative substances left behind by the previous expert. They can no longer be considered living things. Lin Yu, be careful, the Pavilion Lord reminded. Lin Yu nodded. These strange creatures had similar characteristics to the ones Lin Yu encountered in the origin ground. He was very experienced in dealing with them. The power of the ancient characters lingered around his body, isolating the polluted aura from his body. In less than 15 minutes, Lin Yu had killed all the indescribable things here. The gray aura dissipated. Lin Yu stood quietly on the spot, looking at the drop of gray liquid on his fingertip. His eyes were constantly analyzing it. He was using his universe fire and burial ice to cultivate his eyes. He wanted to comprehend the origin of this gray substance. In the end, Lin Yu felt pain in his eyes. He didn't get the result he wanted. Lin Yu, this gray substance must not be contaminated, the Pavilion Lord reminded. He looked at the residue of the gray substance on Lin Yu's fingertip and couldn't help but be shocked. However, Lu Yu stood calmly at the side. He seemed to have known that the substance here couldn't cause any substantial harm to Lin Yu. Is it really the mysterious characters? Lu Yu muttered to himself. His eyes were filled with curiosity. Lin Yu didn't care too much about this. He had never told anyone that he had mastered the origin ancient characters. The people of the Divine Court didn't have any malicious intentions towards Lin Yu. Hence, he wasn't afraid of being exposed. More importantly, there weren't many people in the entire North Star ancient country who could pose a threat to him. I'm getting more and more curious about this kid, Lu Yu said indifferently. After Lin Yu dealt with the indescribable things here, the group of people left. They stopped for a moment and then quickly left. There was no telling how many of them there were in the Evernight continent. In order to avoid the appearance of undefeatable things, Lin Yu and the others were walking very cautiously. Even though Lin Yu now had the origin ancient characters, the living beings here were formed from the negative matter left behind by countless 10th-step powerhouses. Therefore, he still needed to be very careful. The Pavilion Master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion had already taken out an ancient map, which recorded the location of the ruins. The few of them were following a set of coordinates on the ancient scroll and were moving forward quickly. Just like that, a month passed. Although they had encountered a few waves of attacks from those things, Lin Yu had managed to neutralize them all without any mishaps. Thanks to Lin Yu's explanation, the Pavilion Lord of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion took out a tortoiseshell to defend against the indescribable thing. The patterns recorded on the tortoiseshell were similar to the origin ancient characters. Therefore, it was very effective in restraining the things here. Lin Yu was alone in front, while Lu Yu, the Pavilion Lord of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion, and Sheng were behind Lin Yu with the tortoiseshell in hand. They were already close to the depths of the Evernight continent. All the light had disappeared completely. The group could only move forward slowly by relying on their divine sense. However, at this moment, Crow took out an item that emitted a faint light that illuminated an area. He held a black stick in his hand. However, as Lu Yu poured his divine power into it, it began to emit light. This item was very mystical, far surpassing ordinary magic treasures. The Pavilion Lord of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion had already tried it before. Apart from the tortoiseshell that could illuminate a small area, nothing else could show its power here. This item of yours is not bad. Sheng's eyes shone brightly. After coming to the Evernight continent, Sheng was the only one who did not have anything that could protect him. When he saw the item on Lu Yu's body, his eyes revealed a greedy look. You took so many things from me before. It's time to return them, Sheng said directly. To be honest, I don't even care about those things of yours, Lu Yu said disdainfully. Then you ate it too. Now give me an item, Sheng Si said shamelessly. Lu Yu ignored him. The group continued to move forward. However, in the end, Lu Yu could not stand Xing's pestering. In the end, Lu Yu threw down the black stick and handed it to Xing. "That's more like it." Xing nodded in satisfaction. He stroked the black stick with both hands. He was reluctant to part with it. To be able to emit light in the Evernight continent, this item was definitely extraordinary. However, after Xing took the black stick, Lu Yu took out 3 more sticks that were exactly the same. Xing could not help but be speechless. "How many more of these black sticks do you have?" Xing asked with a dark face. Not many, not many. I only have a few dozen," Lu Yu said disdainfully. He looked at Xing with a look of disdain, as if he had never seen the world. "I hope you can work harder. You should know that the Divine Court has never accepted trash," Lu Yu said. Back in the day, the Divine Court was an invincible hero who dominated an era. In this generation, it has really declined. Even such a person is accepted. As he said, Lu Yu did not forget to glance at Xing. The disdain in his eyes was undisguised. "Don't force me." Xing's face was dark. Although he was often scolded by Lu Yu, he had never admitted defeat. At this time, he was not willing to be outdone and said, "You're only at the 6th step. Your body is just a little stronger. Be careful, I'll teach you a lesson." Xing waved his fist as if he would attack at any moment. "The 6th step is not enough to suppress you. I just fell into a deep sleep for too long, causing my realm to drop. If I recover, I'll dominate the world. No one in the entire world can stop me." Lu Yu raised his head and was very proud. After that, he did not forget to scold Xing. "Look at you. After decades of cultivation, you're only at the 7th step. When I was in charge of the Divine Court, I had already slapped you to death. Try it now. Be careful, or I'll pull out all your ahog," Xing said. "How can you talk to the ancestor like that?" Lu Yu questioned. "You're taking advantage of your seniority." Xing did not give him any face at all. At this time, he had the intention to attack. Okay, don't forget the important thing. Senior, don't argue with a child." The pavilion master of the Divine Secret Pavilion came out to smooth things over. Humph! The two turned their heads to the side at the same time. At this time, Lin Yu took out a map. After confirming the location, he said slowly, "It seems that we're only a few 100 miles away from there." They looked into the distance. There was a white light in front of them, illuminating a large area. There were particles floating on it. That should be the ruins that have already been opened, the pavilion master of the Divine Secret Pavilion said. "So, it's here." Lu Yu nodded. "You know this place?" Xing said with bad intentions. "The owner of this ruins was not even worthy of carrying my shoes back then." Lu Yu ignored him and said indifferently, "Look at yourself now. How dare you say such words?" Xing said in disdain. The two of them bickered for a long time. It was only when they saw the ruins that they stopped bickering. "We're close to the ruins. There are people from the Go-Chin ancient country inside. Don't expose yourself," the pavilion master of the Divine Secret Pavilion reminded. Although the two of them did not get along, they still knew who was more important. Therefore they kept quiet. However, their eyes were still filled with disdain. Chapter 1472. They climbed up a deserted mountain range. There were no plants, and the rocks were bare. They could see a white light in the depths of the ruins. It shot up into the sky with a sense of holiness, making the gray matter here unable to get close. There was no longer that indescribable thing here. Only a few people seemed to be sitting cross-legged outside the ruins. They looked very old and seemed to be the oldest existences in the big factions. They had lived for thousands of years and had reached the limit of their lifespan. They were all old monsters who were close to decaying. They came from the big factions in the North Star ancient nation. These old monsters who were about to die would try to enter the land of Evernight at the end of their lives to find a chance to live. It seemed that these old monsters had gotten the news a long time ago. They knew that there was a ruin here. That was why they attacked from behind when the Divine Court made their move. They were undoubtedly experts in the 9th step, but their chi and blood had declined. Some of them were at the 3rd level. The 3rd level was also a big enemy for Linyu. After the 9th step, every level was a different level. The difference was very obvious. Linyu had just entered the 9th step. Although his chi and blood were vigorous and he was at his peak, it was still difficult for him to face someone at the 3rd level. Those who had reached this step in thousands of years were all amazing talent. Their mastery of their own Tao had reached the pinnacle. None of them were much weaker than him. These old fellows. Xing's face was filled with resentment. He had joined the Divine Court for a long time. Now that he knew about the changes in the land of Evernight, he couldn't help but curse these people for being shameless. If these people aren't enough to sneak up on the acting Divine Lord, it seems that there are more powerful existences in the ruins, the Pavilion Master of the Divine Secret Pavilion said. The acting Divine Lord had reached the 5th level of the 9th step. Logically speaking, even if it took a lot of effort to open the ruins, these people shouldn't be able to sneak up on him. The gap between each level of the 9th step was terrifying. Even an expert at the 2nd or 3rd level of the 9th step was just an ant in front of an exhausted 5th level. It's better to be careful. Let's sneak in first. Lu Yu didn't act carelessly. Let's find the acting Divine Lord. The others nodded. The Divine Court had a treasure that could hide one's aura. It was that outfit. At this time, Lin Yu was also wearing the uniform of the Divine Court. All the heavenly secrets had been concealed. Xing had always been wearing it. Therefore, even Lin Yu could not detect Xing's original appearance. This kind of clothing was very mysterious. No one knew who made it. Even though Lin Yu's divine telekinesis had reached the 5th level, it was still difficult for him to detect anything. The Pavilion Master of the Heavenly Secrets Pavilion was deducing the location of the ruins. Lu Yu only glanced at him with disdain and said indifferently, "Qian position, life gate." Lu Yu pointed out. The Heavenly Secrets Pavilion's Pavilion Master frowned slightly. After one final confirmation, the Qian position was indeed the life gate. "Many thanks, Senior." The Pavilion Master cupped his fists and said, "You still have a long way to go," Lu Yu said sincerely. His eyes were filled with vicissitudes and profoundness. "Isn't it just learning about the ruins? There is nothing to be proud of," Xing said. As if being exposed, Lu Yu was a little flustered and exasperated. He said, "Kid, don't meddle in the affairs of the elders." "Okay." Xing responded absent-mindedly. The few of them bypassed the guards and went to the life gate. If the acting Divine Master and the others came to ask me why we paid such a huge price. Lu Yu looked at the broken talisman on the ground and could not help but feel bitter. However, the few of them did not stay there. Instead, they went straight in one direction. There was a majestic aura here. If some people came here, they would never think that this was the location of the life gate of the ruins. The few of them used their strongest means. Lin Yu used the power of the ancient characters to temporarily suppress the majestic aura here. There was a mountain range in front of them. As Lu Yu raised his hand, the stones on the mountain range began to collapse and gradually became illusory. A door was revealed. Without any hesitation, the few of them stepped into it. The environment here changed and the stars changed. The few of them seemed to have come to another world. Although it was still a desolate place, there was an additional life force. It was very hidden but could be clearly sensed. The life force was very strong. Even though the few of them were at the entrance of the ruins, they could still clearly sense it. "I can feel the life force here. Could it be that the people inside are not dead?" Xing said in surprise. At this time, he was absorbing the life force. Even though it was just a little bit, he could feel that his fate will seem to have become much stronger. "As I said, this is a place to raise corpses," Lu Yu said. "The people here are already dead. They are just using the land of eternal night to find an opportunity to revive. Lu Yu said indifferently. Even though this was the graveyard of a 10th step expert, he did not have the slightest fear. It was as if he was really not afraid of a 10th step expert. There was no fear from the bottom of his heart. This time, Xing did not argue with him because this place had given him a great shock. Now, he was still tirelessly absorbing the life force here. Life force was too important to the cultivators in this world. Without longevity, time was undoubtedly the most important thing to step into a higher realm within a few thousand years. You have no ambition. Lu Yu looked at Xing and said disdainfully. However, he quickly used his Dharma artifact and began to collect the life force here. Didn't you have no ambition? Xing said with disdain. I am different from you, Lu Yu said without blushing or skipping a beat. Lin Yu and the pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion just watched the two of them bicker indifferently. However, they were still moving forward. A few days passed. The few of them saw the traces of a battle. There were still remnants of divine power and dried blood. The acting divine master fought with them here. The pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion judged. The traces of a battle here were very new. It seemed to have happened just 1 or 2 months ago. Although the blood had dried up, it still had vitality. The pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion found a place, collected the dried blood, and placed it on the tortoise shell. As a divine fire rose, the divine fire curved and gradually pointed in a direction. The acting divine master has gone deep into the west, the pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion said. Wait! Just as the few of them were about to enter the depths. However, Lin Yu called out to them. The 3 of them stopped. They heard a heart-palpitating sound coming from the depths of the tunnel. It seemed to be the footsteps of something. It was unknown if it was a creature. Rustle, rustle. However, to their ears it was horrifying. Otherworldly soldiers. After Lu Yu calmed his mind, he identified the source of the sound. He said directly, It seems that the creature here is really close to success. There are no problems. The otherworldly soldiers are still ahead. We don't have to worry. As he said that, Lu Yu frowned. He had learned from the otherworldly soldiers that the creature in this ruin was really about to revive. However, Lu Yu only worried for a short while. They continued forward. Suddenly, several groups of decaying creatures appeared in the tunnel. They were all wearing broken armor. They looked very ancient and had a decaying aura. Chapter 1473. As they moved forward, all the vitality in this place was devoured. Ghost soldiers of unknown age suddenly appeared in the passage. Their figures were very illusory, existing between reality and nothingness. As they appeared, they could see that the passage was decaying. The relics built by the 10th step experts, which had existed since ancient times, were aging continuously. The walls were turning into fine powder, rustling and falling. This was undoubtedly extremely terrifying for Xing and the others. Even though they were dozens of feet away from each other, they could still feel their own life force. It was as if it had been frozen and was continuously fading away. Calm down, Lu Yu reminded them. He took out 30 black rods in a row and circled them around their bodies. Only then was he able to resist the decaying aura. At this time, even Lin Yu, who had a strong combat constitution, felt threatened by this aura. It was as if this was a power that had transcended all the world and could decay everything. The ghost soldiers moved very slowly, but they did not sense the existence of Lin Yu and the others. After passing by them, they directly left and disappeared into the wall. Nothing in this world could stop them. The ghost soldiers kept moving in one direction, with no starting point or destination. I didn't expect the ghost soldiers to appear. Lu Yu watched the ghost soldiers leave with a worried look in his eyes. Ghost soldiers, what do they represent? Lin Yu asked. Lu Yu had lived for an unknown number of years. If even he felt worried, it would definitely be a shocking matter. The calamity of reincarnation. Lu Yu only said a few words indifferently. There seemed to be some kind of magic in his words. After the last ghost soldier heard Lu Yu's words, he suddenly turned around and his mouth moved, as if he had discovered the existence of Lin Yu and the others. They seemed to have discovered us. Being stared at by the ghost soldiers, Xing felt goosebumps all over his body, and a chill ran down his spine. Humph! You're just a puppet. Even your master has no right to question me. Lu Yu snorted coldly. Xing looked at him in shock. Lu Yu took out a black rod and suddenly threw it towards the last ghost soldier. After being touched by the black rod, the ghost soldier began to appear, and the decaying skin on his face began to rustle. In the end, it turned into a pile of illusory powder, blending into the void. How dare you kill the ghost soldiers? Xing was extremely shocked. However, Lu Yu did not show any signs of joking. He said directly, "How many ghost soldiers have I killed in the past?" Xing was speechless, only shocked. At this time, Lin Yu stood aside. After seeing the ghost soldiers, he had a guess in his heart. What was the relationship between the ghost soldiers and the land of reincarnation? Or was there a connection between the path that connected the land of origin and this world, which was the path of reincarnation, and the Yin soldiers? Lin Yu didn't have a clue about this. After the commotion was resolved, they continued on their journey. Lu Yu, do you know about the land of reincarnation? Lin Yu couldn't help but ask. If the ghost soldiers here were related to the land of reincarnation, it meant that when the ghost soldiers first entered the land of origin, there was a connection. Perhaps they were of the same origin. In other words, the connection between this world and the land of origin was closer than Lin Yu had imagined. Land of reincarnation? Lu Yu fell into deep thought. He couldn't help but ask, which land of reincarnation are you talking about? There's more than one land of reincarnation? Lin Yu was puzzled. The land of reincarnation has an ancient path that has existed since ancient times, and also a land of reincarnation that was built by later generations. Lu Yu said. Lin Yu didn't know whether the land of reincarnation in his memory was built in later generations or since ancient times. Stone City. Lin Yu finally said. Stone City, the land of reincarnation that was built in later generations. Lu Yu couldn't help but fall into deep thought. I know a little, but not much. After I fell into a deep sleep, the land of reincarnation was built. Lu Yu said slowly, it's the land of reincarnation. I don't even know where it is. However, the land of reincarnation was built to fight against the corrupted land of reincarnation. Lu Yu said slowly. This undoubtedly made Lin Yu's heart tremble slightly. He came from the land of reincarnation. Could it be that he had been set up by someone? Lu Yu didn't know what happened after that. Therefore, Lin Yu didn't ask further. The land of reincarnation that has existed since ancient times has already been destroyed. The Yin soldiers that have appeared here are merely those that fell from that path. Someone has always wanted to regain control of the land of reincarnation. This is a huge matter for all living beings. Many years ago they were stopped. However, it seems like that person has already awakened. Lu Yu said slowly. His eyes were filled with worry. We can only wait for the future. Lu Yu said in the end. Now, he didn't have any way to solve this matter. After all, he was seriously injured back then and hadn't recovered until now. After saying that, Lu Yu looked at Lin Yu. There was a sense of vicissitudes in his eyes. This wasn't an act. He seemed to have known everything long ago. It was just that he didn't point it out in front of Lin Yu. Lin Yu didn't ask further. After spending half a month, they finally reached the depths of the ruins. 5 decaying figures appeared in front of them. There was a strong aura of death on their bodies, surrounded by that gray substance. The power displayed by these people was extraordinary. They were all existences at the 5th level of the 9th step. However, there seemed to be some kind of evil in their eyes. Apparently, they had been eroded by the aura of the land of Evernight. It seemed that they had completely fallen and only a trace of consciousness was left. That person from the Divine Court organization still hasn't appeared? The few people who were sitting cross-legged said slowly. Their consciousness spread out to an extremely far distance. Lin Yu's consciousness wasn't inferior to theirs. He already knew of their existence when he entered this space. At this time, they were hiding in the dark, watching these people closely. These people have fallen into darkness, Lu Yu said indifferently. The future generations didn't expect that someone would also set foot on this path. For longevity, Lu Yu's eyes were filled with disdain. They have forgotten how much the experts back then paid to completely suppress this aura. I didn't expect that in the future there would be their descendants who absorbed this aura again, Lu Yu said. We didn't find that remnant of the Divine Court organization. One of them said slowly. It could be seen that his eye sockets had disappeared. There was only endless darkness inside. It looked very terrifying. In order to survive in the land of Evernight, they had become neither human nor ghost. Lin Yu looked at them with a deep frown. Although they were close to decaying, the suppression here was much smaller. Their realm was still at the peak of the 7th step. For Lin Yu, dealing with one person might not be a problem, but facing 5 at the same time was undoubtedly a huge pressure. They're here. At this time, one of them looked at Lin Yu and the others with empty eyes. We've been discovered. Being stared at by those empty eyes, Xing felt a chill down his spine. For a moment, he felt like he couldn't take a step forward. Chapter 1474. Facing the elder's gaze, he felt as if he had fallen into an abyss. His heart palpitated, and even his divine consciousness seemed to have been devoured. Since we've been discovered, let's fight, Lin Yu said indifferently. By the time Lin Yu spoke, the old men had already locked onto their location. Lin Yu took a step forward and arrived at the center of the field. Although Lin Yu was now suppressed, he could still display the power of the 7th step. He looked at the people in the field with an indifferent expression. Lu Yu also came to the field and stood on Lin Yu's shoulder. His eyes were filled with disdain as he said, "Did you ask your ancestors before you fell into darkness? In order to pursue that short lifespan, you've become neither human nor ghost. Is it worth it?" The elders looked at Lin Yu and the other 3 with a mocking smile. Remnants of the Divine Court organization, we're dedicated to the Tao, but time has been merciless. You're just an old crow. How can you understand us? Lu Yu hated it when people called him an old crow. His eyes gradually turned cold. Since they're from the Divine Court organization, let's cripple them first and take them as hostages to let the Divine Master come out, an elder suggested. Their bodies exuded a decaying aura. Their eyes were sunken, and there were no pupils in them. They looked very strange. Lin Yu looked at them indifferently and said, "Cripple us. Let's see if you have the strength to do so." Lin Yu waved his hand, and the universe fire appeared, turning into a Tao pagoda that protected him and the pavilion master of the heavenly secret pavilion. "Lu Yu, are you okay?" Lin Yu asked. He could clearly feel that after Lu Yu entered here, his strength didn't seem to be suppressed. At this time, he was still at the peak of the 6th step. Coupled with his powerful physical body, it was no problem for him to hold one person back. Without waiting for Lu Yu's reply, Lin Yu made his move. Lin Yu did not dare to be careless in the face of someone who was several levels higher than him. He directly used the power of the origin characters. Several ancient characters circled around his body, releasing a dense radiance. They dispersed the gray matter here and devoured it. It's this kind of power. The elders were clearly shocked when they saw Lin Yu use the ancient characters. This child cannot be left alive, someone said, directly taking action. A gray substance could be seen in their hand. Compared to the indescribable thing outside, the aura it possessed was even more intense. They seemed to have grasped the origin of the gray substance, and were about to merge with their bodies. Even if Lin Yu used the power of the ancient word, it would be difficult for him to suppress it in a short period of time. An old man went up against Lu Yu. Lu Yu was shocked and couldn't help but shout, "Brat, you think too highly of me." He was only at the 6th step. Although he was not suppressed, he was still behind the old man here. However, even though Lu Yu was yelling, he still attacked mercilessly. It was only to see 45 black sticks revolve around his body, transforming into many forms. At the same time, he flapped his large wings and actually repelled that old man in a short period of time. Lu Yu's strength was even stronger than Lin Yu imagined. But this was only a matter of a short period of time. Lu Yu's realm did not recover in the end. Even if he grasped the black sticks, this great killing weapon, in the end, he could still only resist with difficulty. Were we too impulsive? Lu Yu cried out strangely. At this time, he did not forget to launch a counterattack in the process of defending. But now, Lin Yu already had no time to care about other things when facing 4 powerhouses. Universe fire and burial ice revolved around his body. All kinds of means were already used. The few elders also no longer suppressed their realms. They were practically already late-stage 8th step. This made Lin Yu very passive right now. Resisting stubbornly, "I don't know where you all get the courage to dare show up here," an old man said coldly. Lin Yu was repelled back a few steps. Wiping away the blood at the corner of his mouth, he did not say anything. The two of them were incomparably shocked. Now, Lin Yu and Lu Yu had both fallen into a passive state. If nothing unexpected happened, it would not be long before they were defeated. This was undoubtedly a dead end. However, Lin Yu and Lu Yu's combat strength had far exceeded the elders' imagination. Even though their realms were much lower than theirs, they still had room to fight back. "These two cannot be left alive," one of the elders said. Especially the person who was fighting against Lu Yu, it was obvious that he wanted to kill him. He would not hesitate even if he had to grind Lu Yu's bones to dust. Because Lu Yu had actually injured him in the process of fighting back. Moreover, after being pierced by the black stick, the wound on his body could not heal for a long time. This made him realize that the artifact Lu Yu used was definitely not simple. It could suppress the power they had obtained in the Evernight land. Lu Yu's feathers fell to the ground. "Old man, I want you to know how powerful your Grandpa Lu is." Lu Yu looked at the feathers on the ground and lamented bitterly. He wanted nothing more than to skin the old man alive. "Think about whether you can survive first," the old man said coldly as he looked at the talkative Lu Yu. At this moment, Lin Yu was sent flying again. One could see that there was a gray gas on his shoulder that was constantly eroding him. "The situation is over. Give up resisting now and I can let you die a better death." An old man stood in the sky and said indifferently. There was no emotion in his empty eye socket. "Is that so?" Lin Yu stood up and said indifferently. At this moment, a sudden change occurred. Above the sky, a terrifying fluctuation erupted. In an instant, the entire space was shaking. A black-robed man descended from the sky and blasted a person into pieces in an instant. "How dare you act so presumptuously in my God's court organization?" The indifferent words shocked the old men. "Divine Master, you actually recovered in such a short time." The old men were shocked. The acting Divine Master of the God's Court organization was the strongest existence in the entire North Star ancient nation. Before the old men came into contact with the gray substance, they were already very wary of him. Otherwise, they would not have hidden for so long just to ambush the Divine Master. "You've worked hard," the Divine Master said slowly as he looked at Lin Yu. In fact, the Divine Master had already contacted Lin Yu before this and asked him to delay the old men temporarily. Otherwise, Lin Yu would not have acted so rashly. Lin Yu nodded in response. "How dare you target my God's court organization? You're quite bold, the Divine Master said. With a wave of his hand, a formation appeared on the ground and completely sealed off the area. Good lad, you even tricked me. Lu Yu looked at the formation on the ground and instantly understood everything. He said, so you already knew that they were going to ambush you. You just borrowed their strength and sacrificed them to open the ruins completely. The Divine Master was not injured because of the ambush. He had only spread false information to lure the old men out. Then, he sacrificed them to obtain the items in the ruins completely. The Divine Master's plan had fooled everyone, including Lu Yu and the others. Senior, I'm sorry. After all, it's too difficult to find a ninth-step cultivator in the North Star Ancient Nation. If I didn't do it, they wouldn't have come in, the Divine Master said apologetically. You tricked us. The old men were in disbelief. They did not expect that after plotting for so many years, they would be tricked in the end. Looking at the formation around them, they knew that they would not be able to leave today. A peak Divine Master was enough to kill all of them. Chapter 1475. Now that things have come to this, we can only fight, one of the patriarchs said slowly. The acting Divine Master looked down on the world with disdain. He was extremely calm and did not show the slightest bit of fear as he faced the attacks of the patriarchs. It seemed as if these people were no threat to him. You're just rats. Today, I'll sacrifice you all to the ruins, the acting Divine Master said slowly. He extended his right hand and the power of heaven and earth started to gather towards him. He didn't use any forbidden techniques, but the power he exuded was enough to make everyone tremble in fear. The acting Divine Master was definitely an invincible existence in the entire North Star Ancient Country. His reputation had existed for thousands of years and no one could shake it. Even though many powerhouses had reached the ninth step in the past thousands of years, they all kept their mouths shut and avoided the topic of the acting Divine Master on purpose. In the past, the North Star Ancient Country had also launched a punitive expedition against the Divine Court. However, for some unknown reason, the expedition was left unsettled. According to some people, the Emperor of the North Star Ancient Country had either compromised or been defeated by the acting Divine Master. However, no one knew that the Divine Court had not taken over the North Star Ancient Country in the end. However, these were extremely deep secrets that outsiders did not know about. Lin Yu looked at the acting Divine Master. Great path runes flickered in his eyes as he analyzed the technique that the acting Divine Master had used. Although the acting Divine Master did not use any techniques, it seemed like an ordinary attack that even a ninth-step powerhouse would not be able to withstand. Lin Yu knew that even if he used all his techniques, he would not be able to withstand a single attack from the acting Divine Master. Are you curious about how terrifying that kid's offensive power is? Lu Yu came to Lin Yu's side and said with a smile. He no longer looked as pathetic as before. Instead, he was in high spirits, as if victory was already within his grasp. What do you mean? Lin Yu asked. Indeed, that kid did not use any true mystique or technique. However, he has already cultivated a mystique that is close to the Tao, Lu Yu said faintly. This is something that a few peerless figures of the Divine Court discovered in a mysterious place, Lu Yu explained to Lin Yu. As a member of the Divine Court, Lin Yu was naturally qualified to do so. Lu Yu seemed to trust Lin Yu very much, so he told him everything he knew about the Divine Court. A divine ability that is close to the Tao. Lin Yu sank into his memories. It's not weaker than a 10th step expert's ultimate divine ability. It might even surpass it. In the end, Lu Yu said faintly, however, you will slowly understand the profoundness of this technique in the future. Lin Yu was slightly shocked. How terrifying was a spell that surpassed the 10th step? Are these spells still in the hands of the Divine Court? Lin Yu couldn't help asking. However, Lu Yu shook his head and said, they were lost in the previous battle. Now, the acting Divine Master has only mastered one of them. Since the Divine Court was so powerful back then, why did it end up like this in the end? Lin Yu was puzzled. You don't know how powerful the enemy that the Divine Court faced was. Lu Yu sighed faintly. Lin Yu didn't continue asking. The Divine Master's invincible power shocked everyone here. In less than an hour, the Divine Master killed everyone here. Then, the Divine Master collected their corpses and placed them in the array. As the flames of the way rose, runes that made one's heart palpitate appeared on the ground. They were very powerful and had a majestic aura. Looking at the runes was like looking at a majestic divine mountain. It was difficult to look directly at it. Everyone, lend me a hand, the Divine Master said. Kid, you have to give me an explanation when you go out, Lu Yu said. We'll each take a side. As he spoke, he went to the west side. Lin Yu, the pavilion master of the Divine Secret Pavilion, and Xing were in the other 4 directions. As they poured in their divine power, the corpses turned into ashes. The corpses of the old men began to turn into ashes, and the divine substance on their bodies slowly merged into the ground. Rumbling sounds were endless. They felt as if they were in the immortal realm. There was a strong vitality here. They felt as if they had ascended to immortality. However, this feeling was illusory and unrealistic. What's happening down there? Several experts sitting cross-legged in the outside world were shocked. Their patriarchs had all entered it to hunt down the divine lords of the Divine Court. Now that there was a sudden change, they were all extremely shocked. However, at this time, the ruins were once again sealed. Due to the influence of the relic, they didn't even know that the Divine Masters had died. They looked at their life slips at the same time. When they found that they were still lit, they were relieved and continued to guard the outside world. The Divine Court's master is already at the end of his rope. Perhaps the patriarchs have already killed him. Now that the real relic has been opened, we can obtain the fortune inside, someone said. The others nodded. Obviously, they agreed with this statement. It's a pity that we can't enter it, someone said with a sigh. When the patriarchs come out of seclusion, we will benefit greatly, someone comforted. After that, they closed their eyes again and extended their divine consciousness. At this time, the ground under the ruins had completely changed. Because of the endless vitality, many ancient strange plants grew on the ground. After an unknown amount of time, this place seemed to have turned into a barren land. However, since there were no living creatures, it still looked like an ancient book. The landscape of this place has changed. Xing looked over and was shocked. Vigorous vitality surged. The few of them looked around. You're not blind. You can see it, Lu Yu said disdainfully. Xing didn't argue with him. The Divine Master also descended from the sky. Greetings, Divine Master. Xing bowed. Greetings, Divine Master. The Pavilion of Divine Secrets bowed slightly to the Divine Master. No need for formalities, the Divine Master said calmly. The Divine Master was a middle-aged man. His face was chiseled, and he was very handsome. You must be Lin Yu. The Divine Master looked at Lin Yu with satisfaction. Yes. Lin Yu nodded. However, he only cupped his hands and didn't bow. The Divine Master didn't care at all. He looked into the distance and said calmly, This is the original appearance of the relic. The thing we want is in the deepest part. Then, the Divine Master pointed in a direction. In that case, let's go. Lu Yu said, This place is now occupied by the Yin soldiers. I don't know if the thing you want is still there. This was Lu Yu's concern. We don't have much time left, Lu Yu said to the Divine Master. The Divine Master understood what Lu Yu meant. He had already seen the Yin soldiers before this. That lineage is the mortal enemy of the God's court. I didn't expect them to invade this place, the Divine Master said. That lineage has always been strange. It seems that the war will spread to the entire world, Lu Yu said slowly. What is this? Lu Yu asked as they moved forward. It should be the reincarnation talisman, the Divine Master said. The Divine Master didn't know what was inside. Lu Yu nodded and said, "It's a good thing." "What is the reincarnation talisman?" Lin Yu asked, puzzled. The reincarnation talisman can allow one to retain the memories of their previous life and safely embark on the path of reincarnation, Lu Yu said. However, Lin Yu wasn't interested in the effects of the stone. He thought that the reincarnation talisman could connect to the land of reincarnation. Could he use the reincarnation talisman to enter the land of reincarnation, then return to the land of origin? At this thought, Lin Yu was interested in the reincarnation talisman. Chapter 1476. Back then, this expert obtained more than one reincarnation talisman, but I don't know if there are more in his burial ground. The Divine Master didn't know much about this either. Is there no more reincarnation talisman in the Divine Court? Lu Yu asked. This was the first time he met the acting Divine Master after he woke up. However, he didn't feel distant at all. Instead, he asked directly. "It's long gone. In that great battle, it was used by many people who died," the Divine Master said. However, he didn't experience that battle. He only knew about it from the records of the Divine Court. He also knew about the great use of the reincarnation talisman, so he planned for this for a long time. "However, although your method succeeded, I'm a little disappointed," Lu Yu said indifferently. At this moment, his tone was serious. The Divine Master didn't say anything, accepting Lu Yu's criticism. The Divine Master of the Divine Court, even if he's just an acting Divine Master, is the second most powerful existence in the world. If you lack offerings, you can just capture a few. There's no need to scheme, Lu Yu lectured. Sigh. This generation's Divine Court seems to be in decline. Lu Yu sighed. He didn't seem to be joking. The Divine Master didn't refute this. He was the strongest expert in the entire North Star ancient nation, but he was still lacking if he wanted to be the most powerful expert in the world. He also deeply understood how terrifying the organization of the Divine Court was in the past. In his generation, it had declined a little. However, there was nothing he could do about it. "This isn't your fault. The eastern foothill of the land of Evernight is too barren. Back then, we moved here to complete a certain task," Lu Yu said. He was just lecturing and didn't mean to blame him. Xing didn't refute Lu Yu. He was very obedient in front of the Divine Master. It was rare for him to see the elusive Divine Master. Now that he saw him, he was naturally excited. And this kid is too weak. If he was in the previous Divine Court, he wouldn't even be qualified to carry his shoes. Lu Yu saw that the Divine Master didn't refute him and couldn't help but criticize Xing. "You." Xing's eyes were filled with hatred. "Senior, you're right," the Divine Master said. But Xing's identity. The Divine Master didn't continue. Not long after, they arrived at the depths of this place. In the middle of a few huge black stone pillars, there was an area shrouded in gray fog. Vaguely, one could see that there seemed to be something swimming inside, giving off a heart-palpitating feeling. Within the gray fog, Tao and truth were intertwined. However, there was something strange about it. Everyone couldn't help but feel a chill down their spines. After Lin Yu and the others arrived, a certain power looked over. There seemed to be some kind of karma that directly eroded the origin of Lin Yu and the others. Lin Yu could see that under their gazes, their bodies seemed to be connected by some unknown thread. Lin Yu had a deep understanding of these threads. They were the threads of karma. However, there was a strange power attached to them. The Lord of the Divine Court had taken action, but he still couldn't get rid of the threads. "Let me give it a try," Lin Yu said slowly. He took a step forward, and the power of karma appeared on his body. The stone sword in his hand was engraved with 9 ancient origin characters. Whoosh! It seemed that Lin Yu had just casually swung his sword, but it cut off some of the air. It didn't have any substantial effect. However, after Lin Yu swung his sword, the people on the ground felt relieved. The four of them felt their bodies relax. It was as if the corrosive power had disappeared in an instant. How mystical! Sheng was pleasantly surprised. Previously, he had regarded Lin Yu as someone of the same generation. However, after experiencing so many things, he was even more in awe of him. This degree of awe had almost surpassed that of the pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion. Where did he come from? Xing couldn't help but wonder in his heart. Xing wasn't considered a high-level member of the divine court, so he wasn't qualified to know Lin Yu's identity. However, now that he saw Lin Yu attack, he was even more curious. As expected, it's the power of Dao, Lu Yu said. How many Daos have you mastered? Lin Yu didn't answer or deny it. This place has been turned into a stronghold of the Nether soldiers. I don't know if the reincarnation talisman still exists inside. Lu Yu was puzzled. I'm afraid it's difficult to enter the stronghold of the Nether soldiers with our current strength. The divine master frowned for the first time. Lu Yu nodded. The Nether soldiers were existences on the reincarnation road with endless secrets. Now, this place had been turned into a stronghold. Lu Yu's strength hadn't recovered, so it would be difficult for him to really enter. It would be a huge risk. Lin Yu looked at the gray fog and didn't have the slightest confidence. Back then, I single-handedly defeated countless Nether soldiers. Now, this small stronghold is just a small thing that escaped from the reincarnation road. I can't do anything about it. Lu Yu was so anxious that he jumped. However, we must get the reincarnation talisman, the divine court master said. We need to bring back the experts who were reincarnated because of the war back then. Lin Yu thought of the land of reincarnation on Earth. Back then, the first emperor had also asked him to bring the reincarnation talisman. Were the two talisman papers the same thing? But soon, Lin Yu shook his head. The reincarnation talisman here was related to the reincarnation road, and Earth was just a testing ground for the supreme evolution back then. In terms of power, it should be far inferior. Just as the few of them were at their wits' end. Suddenly, they saw a figure slowly walking out from the depths of the gray fog. Gradually, his figure became clear. The person who appeared had a stooped figure, gray clothes, and gray hair. It seemed that he had been completely contaminated by the gray matter. However, the aura on his body carried the characteristics of this world. It's you, kid. Lu Yu recognized the old man who appeared. However, Lu Yu frowned slightly. It was obvious that there was no sign of life on this figure. He had already been dead for an unknown amount of time. Now, he had appeared only because of his obsession. Was he once a member of the divine court? Xing couldn't help but ask. He could feel a huge pressure coming from the figure. This was definitely a powerhouse of the 10th step. Even though he had passed away for countless years, it was still enough to make people's hearts palpitate. They had the urge to kneel down and worship him. No, but back then, he was very close to the divine court. I didn't expect that he was the one who left the relic. Lu Yu said with melancholy, Is there really no one from our era who survived to this day? He couldn't help but look at the figure in the distance. The figure spread out his hands, interweaving Tao and truth. A strong reincarnation aura appeared. It actually caused the grayish gas in the area to temporarily dissipate by quite a bit. Reincarnation talisman papers. Xing looked at the figure, spread out his hands, and 3 talisman papers of different colors appeared. They carried a mighty force. Just by looking at them a few times, he could feel that he was about to be reborn. Xing's eyes gradually blurred. With the appearance of the reincarnation talisman papers, everything on this land showed signs of extinction. This trend was irreversible. This reincarnation power is so rich. Lin Yu was slightly surprised. There seemed to be a kind of power in his body that was being drawn out. However, he quickly suppressed it. He had already completely mastered the Tao law of reincarnation. However, it was obviously not a good time to show it. There seemed to be a pair of eyes in the gray fog that were staring at him covetously. However, for some reason, when he saw the reincarnation talisman papers in front of the Divine Master and the others, he didn't stop them. Lin Yu's eyes were very sharp. The thing inside was definitely not something that could be defeated now. It would probably be very troublesome even if he broke through to the 10th step. The mystery of this world is far beyond my imagination. Lin Yu couldn't help but sigh. The talisman papers slowly came in front of the Divine Master and the others. Have you been guarding these reincarnation talisman papers? Lu Yu looked at the gray figure. His body had been corroded by the gray substance. He appeared now only because he sensed the arrival of the people from the divine court through his obsession. Chapter 1477. The gray figure didn't answer. Under everyone's gaze, layers of gray shells fell from his body. As he turned around, he returned to the gray fog and gradually turned into a pile of powder. Something inside attacked. Lin Yu couldn't help but murmur. He could clearly sense that there was something inside that was extremely powerful. It was definitely not the Yin soldier that Lu Yu mentioned. It was something else. We can't stay here for long, Lin Yu said with a serious face. It was the first time Sheng and the pavilion master of the Divine Secret Pavilion saw Lin Yu so serious. They couldn't help but ask, "What happened? Did you see what was inside?" Lu Yu took the talisman and looked at Lin Yu with a deep frown. Lin Yu nodded. It was because he had mastered the reincarnation great path. At this moment, he could feel the thing in the depths of the gray fog the most. If they stayed here any longer, they might be buried here. The Divine Master directly took out a tool, a bronze lamp that could disperse the gray energy around them. He began to be on guard. I see. There's a big guy hibernating here. No wonder. Lu Yu understood everything. He immediately moved and shouted, "We can't fight against it now. Let's leave first." However, it won't come out in a short time. Facing Lin Yu's warning, they all looked serious, including the Divine Master. They quickly left this place. After an unknown amount of time, they arrived at the edge of the vestige. Lin Yu and the Divine Master guarded the back. However, they didn't know when, but a stream of gray blood flowed out from the corner of Lin Yu's mouth. His face was pale and his aura became weak. His vitality was quickly fading. Lin Yu, what happened? Xing turned his head and saw Lin Yu's condition. He couldn't help but turn pale with fright. They didn't know what had happened. Obviously, nothing had happened just now. However, they didn't know when Lin Yu had been injured. Moreover, there was a gray energy around him that was constantly eroding his body. Don't get close. Lin Yu told everyone to stay away from him. Only he knew that before they left, the thing in the depths of the gray mist had attacked him. This method was extremely strange. Even Lin Yu was caught off guard. If he had not used the power of the reincarnation great path to suppress the gray aura deep within his body, he would have been corroded and fallen into darkness forever. This power, Lin Yu muttered to himself as he sat down cross-legged on the ground. This power, this method seemed to be very similar to the power that had killed him back then. It also appeared out of nowhere. I won't make the same mistake twice, Lin Yu said coldly in his heart. Back when he was in the origin grounds, the creature in the bronze coffin had used this method on him. He was helpless for the next few thousand years, and in the end, he had died in the secret grounds. If he hadn't sacrificed himself in the end, he might have died forever. As Lin Yu used the power of the reincarnation great path, the gray aura in his body was gradually disappearing. What kind of power does he have? He's only at the 9th step, but he can suppress the gray aura? Even Lu Yu couldn't help but be shocked. The Divine Master's expression changed as well. They didn't know what kind of method Lin Yu had used to suppress the gray aura in his body. Move away. Lu Yu saw that the gray aura in Lin Yu's body was gradually withdrawing. He seemed to have thought of something and immediately informed everyone. At the same time, Lu Yu took out 40 black rods and suppressed Lin Yu's surroundings. A mighty force appeared and supported Lin Yu. The few of them didn't dare to be careless. Just as they were about to withdraw, an even more terrifying gray aura erupted from Lin Yu's body. The two had different origins, but they seemed to be the same method. Since you want to kill me, why don't I make use of this power to devour you instead? Lin Yu had an epiphany. In fact, before he died, he had tried this method. However, he didn't have complete control of the reincarnation great path back then, so he couldn't do anything. However, at that moment, another strange power entered his body. Lin Yu seemed to have found the critical point. He activated the reincarnation great path and gathered the gray aura towards his abdomen. At the same time, the remaining gray aura that had killed him also appeared there. The two gray auras intertwined, but it was difficult for them to merge into one. It seemed that the Tao laws of the world were different. The two powers came from the same origin, but it was difficult for them to merge. Not only that, they seemed to be repelling each other. However, Lin Yu didn't care so much. The reincarnation Tao law turned into symbols of the origin. It suppressed the two gray auras separately. Then, the two gray auras slowly took shape. Finally, under Lin Yu's control, the two gray auras turned into two parts of the millstone. The reincarnation great path was added to it, forming the engravings. There was a sense of ancientness and vicissitude. The millstone seemed to have existed here since ancient times. When Lin Yu opened his eyes, 2 months had passed. To Lin Yu, it seemed like only a moment. "Give me a chance." Lin Yu stared at the center of the ruins and sneered. "When the time comes, I will pay you back double, no matter what relationship you have with the bronze coffin creature in the origin place." The thing in the depths of the ruins seemed to be aware. Roar. The weak roar was indescribably eerie when it reached the ears of these people. Xing, in particular, had wrinkles on his skin even though he had the protection of the Divine Master and the others. Cracks appeared on his skin, and he seemed to be dying. Lin Yu's eyes shone on Xing's body. A gray aura appeared on Xing's body. It directly entered Lin Yu's body. Then, the millstone in his body slowly turned, grinding the gray aura into nourishment. It could be seen that the power in Lin Yu's body seemed to have grown stronger. Thank you," Xing said weakly. However, Lin Yu also saw Xing's true appearance when he looked at him just now. What was surprising was that he was a woman. Moreover, he had a devastatingly beautiful appearance. In terms of beauty, he was probably not inferior to Lu Rushi and Yu Linglong. When Lu Yu saw the method Lin Yu used, he couldn't help but be surprised. He couldn't help but say, "You are using this power." "There is no problem," Lin Yu replied calmly. "This power represents the extreme strangeness." Lu Yu still had a worried expression as he said, "Since ancient times, there has been no lack of people who have wanted to borrow this power. However, in the end, all of them ended up in the same situation, becoming an indescribable member." Lu Yu came in front of Lin Yu and wanted to examine him carefully. "I see. You have come into contact with this gray substance before." Lu Yu was surprised. Lin Yu nodded. However, he didn't mention the past and how he was eroded by the gray aura and died. Chapter 1478. The few of them opened the ruins. Along the way, Lu Yu said, "Although you're very familiar with this gray gas, I still advise you not to use it too much." Lu Yu warned him loyally. This was Lu Yu's good intention. Lin Yu also nodded. However, he did not know that Lin Yu had already used the Tao law of reincarnation to completely refine the gray gas into a millstone. He was not using this power, but was truly controlling it. "You guys leave first. I want to cultivate in this ruin for a while more," Lin Yu said to the few of them. Now that he had turned the gray gas into a millstone, he could absorb and refine the power here. The soldiers here were the best nourishment for Lin Yu. Therefore, he wanted to strengthen his power here. He had been in this world for 5 or 6 years now. There was no need to delay any longer. After understanding more, he realized that the flow of time in this world seemed to be different from that in the origin land. It seemed to be much slower. He did not know how much time had passed in the origin land and the universe. Therefore, Lin Yu needed to return as soon as possible. Perhaps this was the place where he could truly attain his Tao. Don't go near there, Lu Yu reminded him. At the mention of the place where the gray gas gathered, Lu Yu frowned. That place was filled with danger. He did not want Lin Yu to continue going there. Lin Yu nodded. He was well aware of this. Although Lin Yu had already neutralized the means that the thing had used on him, it was not something that Lin Yu could fight against it now. However, it did not mean that he could not do it in the future. Since you've already made up your mind, I can't say anything else, Lu Yu said. Come back alive, the Divine Master said. Be careful, the Divine Master of the Divine Secret Pavilion said. After staying in the ruins for a few months, they also knew that this place was very dangerous. They could easily be eroded by the gray gas and completely turn into a walking corpse. This was not what they wanted to see Lin Yu end up like. Lin Yu nodded in response to their good intentions. The Divine Lord called for Lin Yu alone. He handed the lamp over to Lin Yu and said, Now I will teach you my magical art, Blazing Heaven. This is related to the 10th step and beyond, you must study it well. The Divine Master didn't hold back at all as he imparted his own understanding of the blazing sky to Lin Yu. Thank you, Divine Lord, Lin Yu said solemnly. The moment he came into contact with Blazing Heaven, he knew that this technique was not simple. Lin Yu was very grateful to the Divine Master for not holding anything back. He didn't know why the Divine Court was so good to him, but since the Divine Court was so kind to him, he didn't mind. Lin Yu wasn't a heartless person. He also knew what he had to do next. As the door to the ruins opened, the few of them left. One could see that the Divine Master's casual attacks had turned the few people who were guarding outside into blood mist. After seeing this scene, Lin Yu slowly turned around and entered the ruins once again. After traveling for a few days, as Lin Yu walked forward, he comprehended the blazing sky imparted by the Divine Master. As the gray mist in front of him began to surge, Lin Yu knew that it was the otherworldly soldiers passing through, and he had been waiting for this opportunity. Then, a few otherworldly soldiers wearing rotting armor slowly appeared in the passage. Lin Yu first hid his aura. Then, the otherworldly soldiers appeared beside him. Lin Yu immediately made his move. The power of the origin ancient word appeared on his stone sword. Chi! He slashed out with his sword. A few of the undead soldiers immediately turned into gray smoke, following which their illusionary figures turned into dust and began to dissipate. Lin Yu immediately took the gray mist into his hand. Then, without the slightest hesitation, he directly swallowed it. As the otherworldly soldier's pure gray mist entered his body, Lin Yu's eyes revealed a demonic look. His divine consciousness was affected for a short period of time. However, this was only temporary. Soon, Lin Yu crushed the gray mist with his own millstone, turning it into pure energy that entered his limbs and bones. The power in his body was constantly growing. It was just a few otherworldly soldiers, but Lin Yu was almost about to break through to the second level. The power in the otherworldly soldiers' bodies was so vast that Lin Yu couldn't help but be a little surprised. Are these otherworldly soldiers transformed from former powerhouses, or were they created by the path of reincarnation? Lin Yu didn't understand. If these otherworldly soldiers were transformed from powerhouses after they died, then this force was undoubtedly terrifying. This was because every otherworldly soldier here probably had the strength of the 9th step. It was only because they lacked spiritual intelligence that Lin Yu was able to succeed in one strike. Now, the remaining otherworldly soldiers in front seemed to have sensed that someone was attacking them from behind. They turned around ferociously, and their jaws, which were still attached to a bit of skin and flesh, cracked, making one's hair stand on end. Some of the otherworldly soldiers' limbs were broken. The broken weapons, such as broadswords, axes, and dagger axes, were mostly rotten. They carried a rotten aura that seemed to be able to corrode even the void. When they attacked, the entire passage was changing, and the stone walls were eroded. Lin Yu used the ancient word to protect himself. However, the otherworldly soldiers' decaying power was very strange. Even now, Lin Yu used the power of the ancient word. It was still difficult to completely resist it. In the end, Lin Yu didn't hesitate to use the power of the clay jar. Then, he used the stone sword. At this time, the otherworldly soldiers were already rushing toward Lin Yu. They roared and howled, as if they were malicious ghosts from the 9 hells. Lin Yu's face was calm. The stone sword shone. There were still a few otherworldly soldiers left here. However, the leader of them was very powerful. He had almost reached the 3rd level of the 9th step. He wasn't suppressed now. The power that he could unleash was unimaginable. Under the support of the clay jar, the otherworldly soldiers here seemed to show fear. They didn't have spiritual intelligence as Lin Yu imagined. This fear seemed to be in the origin. "I didn't expect the clay jar to have a suppressive effect on you," Lin Yu said indifferently. One could see that on Lin Yu's stone sword, there seemed to be a yellow ancient flame that enveloped the sword. Although it didn't have any power, in the eyes of the otherworldly soldiers, it was filled with endless threat. Some otherworldly soldiers even began to retreat. However, under the roar of the leader of the otherworldly soldiers, several otherworldly soldiers still stepped forward and pounced on Lin Yu. Chi, one of the otherworldly soldiers, was directly pierced by Lin Yu. Then, Lin Yu directly crushed its head with one hand. The gray substance entered Lin Yu's body through his nose. His spirit was uplifted. It seemed that the gray gas was a rare nourishment for him. If someone saw this scene, those who were familiar with the gray substance would probably be shocked. Who would dare to absorb the gray gas like this? It was no different from courting death. Even the few elders who had fallen previously spent a long time gradually coming into contact with this gray gas. They didn't dare to directly absorb it and turn it into their own nourishment. Now, Lin Yu directly did so. The scene was undoubtedly shocking. Chapter 1479. At this moment, Lin Yu looked more like he had come from the underworld than the Een soldier. As he took a step forward, the Een soldiers were killed one by one. In the end, Lin Yu broke through to the 2nd level. Now, he had put away the stone sword. In his eyes there was a demonic gray aura. He was like a demon king, cold and bloodthirsty. His mind seemed to have been affected by the excessive intake of the gray aura. Therefore, he was gradually losing his mind. The last Een soldier died in Lin Yu's hands. He was cut into 8 pieces and torn into pieces. Roar! Lin Yu roared. An endless amount of gray gas swirled around his body. It was as if absorbing the gray gas was a form of enjoyment for him. If this was a place where living beings lived, they would have been in a terrible situation, because Lin Yu seemed to be unable to control his actions. However, as time passed, Lin Yu reached the peak of the 2nd level. The gray aura on his body was gradually absorbed into his body. It was completely refined by the millstone. Lin Yu's eyes gradually regained their clarity. "Looks like you're still a little impatient," Lin Yu said. If there were any living beings here, Lin Yu would have already started a massacre, and no one would be able to resist him. After all, he was at the 9th step. In the entire Gauchian ancient country, except for a few people, who could resist him. Moreover, in the ruins, everyone's cultivation was suppressed. Under the power of the clay jar, Lin Yu could fully use his cultivation. But since we're in the ruins, no one has to worry about it, Lin Yu said. The gray aura couldn't corrode him. However, if he absorbed it too quickly, it would temporarily affect his mind. This wasn't a big problem. After some practice, Lin Yu was sure that his millstone could completely destroy the gray aura and turn it into his own power. Lin Yu continued to move forward. Now, he had turned into the Een soldier slaughterer and was searching everywhere in the ruins. Those who entered the Evernight land would want to avoid the Een soldiers when they saw them. But now, Lin Yu was actively searching. Therefore, he deliberately left a wisp of gray aura to guide the way. 3 days passed. Lin Yu's cultivation was almost finished. This mainly relied on his understanding of the realm and the Tao induction scripture. He could quickly grasp his own realm. However, Lin Yu could still feel that as his strength continued to grow, there seemed to be a bottleneck. It was just that he hadn't encountered it yet. Perhaps if he advanced a few more minor realms, his cultivation would stagnate for a long period of time, and he would need time to stabilize. However, this was a matter for the future. 3 days later, Lin Yu once again encountered a wave of Een soldiers. Unsurprisingly, Lin Yu killed all of them and then devoured the gray gas. His strength's cultivation. He was now at the 3rd level of the 9th step. This kind of speed of advancement, especially at the 9th step, was simply unimaginable. No one dared to believe it. However, Lin Yu wasn't satisfied. He continued to move forward. There was more than one group of Een soldiers in the ruins. As Lin Yu had killed 2 groups, he seemed to have a certain understanding of the patterns of Een soldiers' appearance. The 7th day passed. Lin Yu was getting deeper and deeper into the ruins. He saw 2 groups of Een soldiers. Their destination is here. Lin Yu looked at the location where the gray fog was. Lin Yu was enlightened. At this moment, he could see that the 2 groups of Een soldiers seemed to be carrying a coffin. There was a strong smell of blood on it. He didn't know where it came from. However, there was a terrifying aura in the coffin. It's a true spirit, the true spirit of a certain expert. Lin Yu's divine will was very strong. At this moment, through the eyes that had been refined by universe fire and burial ice, he could clearly see the thing in the coffin. This made Lin Yu a little shocked. He had been in the North Star ancient country for a few years and had a lot of understanding of the experts there. However, the true spirit in the coffin clearly didn't come from the North Star ancient country. It didn't belong to any of the experts. This made Lin Yu feel shocked. The aura that the true spirit emitted was definitely at the 9th step. However, for some unknown reason, he fell and was brought here by the Een soldiers. It seems that these Een soldiers are just out to look for food. They are looking for nourishment for the thing in the gray fog. Lin Yu seemed to know something and muttered to himself. This might be related to the birth of the thing in the fog. Since Lin Yu already knew, he naturally wouldn't let the thing in the fog get what it wanted. Without much preparation, Lin Yu directly attacked. The yellow aura of the clay pot in his hand raged. This time, he didn't act carelessly. The stone sword exploded with a bright light and directly destroyed a part of it. At the same time, he absorbed the gray aura. The coffin directly exploded. Lin Yu was now at the 3rd level of the 9th step. In his eyes, ordinary Een soldiers were no longer a big threat. However, it was obvious that the Een soldiers who could bring back true spirits were very powerful. They weren't weaker than Lin Yu now. They came back to their senses and wanted to attack Lin Yu. However, Lin Yu now used the power of the clay pot. Even if the Een soldier's strength was similar to Lin Yu's, it couldn't withstand Lin Yu's sword. Boom! The whole place exploded. Not only did Lin Yu kill the powerful nether soldier with his sword, but he also killed the nether soldier. Even the coffin was smashed into smithereens. The true spirit inside mixed into the gray aura and was completely absorbed by Lin Yu. The true spirit seemed to retain a trace of consciousness and perceived the aura of its kind. At this time, It actually took the initiative to enter Lin Yu's body and become the nourishment for Lin Yu's divine sense. The true spirit was incomparably pure. It was the purest remnant of an expert after death, without the slightest side effect. Lin Yu's divine sense was also growing at a speed visible to the naked eye. This expert skill is probably not weaker than the 6th level of the 9th step, Lin Yu said. However, Lin Yu didn't absorb the expert's origin completely. He kept the core and let it dissipate in the ruins, leaving behind the hope of reincarnation. One could see that the person bowed deeply to Lin Yu and then disappeared into the void. Lin Yu didn't know if this person had really dissipated or gone to reincarnate. Lin Yu didn't know much about this either. Lin Yu naturally didn't let go of the remaining group of Yin soldiers. He directly killed them as soon as he attacked. The scene fell into silence. After refining the true spirit and the gray aura, Lin Yu's realm improved again. He wasn't satisfied. Now he had a rough idea of the Yin soldiers' purpose. They were to provide nourishment for the thing in the gray fog. Since that was the case, he could just wait here for the Nether soldiers to arrive and kill them when they arrived. Although the Nether soldiers could have entered the gray fog from all directions, they were not able to escape. But now Lin Yu only needed to station in one direction and the harvest would be great. As time passed, Lin Yu encountered the third group of Yin soldiers on the third day. He didn't hold back at all and directly killed all the Yin soldiers. Chapter 1480. His realm was because there was a ghost soldier with the strength of the 4th level among the ghost soldiers. Lin Yu's realm, after some accumulation, broke through again and reached the 4th level. Now, there was a faint gray aura lingering around his body. It seemed that it was about to be assimilated. Next, Lin Yu did not waste any time. He quickly settled his realm, and then got rid of the gray aura in his body and completely refined it. In the next month, Lin Yu killed countless ghost soldiers. This was tantamount to snatching food from the tiger's mouth. Finally, when Lin Yu killed the last group of ghost soldiers, the thing in the depths of the gray fog seemed to have sensed Lin Yu's existence. At this moment, it roared. It seemed to be threatening Lin Yu. However, for the current Lin Yu, as long as the main body of that thing did not appear, it would not pose the slightest threat to him. This is just collecting some interest. When the time comes, I will settle it personally, Lin Yu said indifferently. In the end, after killing 20 groups of ghost soldiers, his strength broke through to the 5th step. Because of Lin Yu's existence, the thing in the depths of the gray fog seemed to be deliberately controlling the ghost soldiers to not appear in the world. However, now that Lin Yu had absorbed and refined so much gray aura, he had a deep sense of the existence of the ghost soldiers. Although it was not in Lin Yu's position, it still could not escape Lin Yu's means. Next, he killed a few more groups of ghost soldiers. In the end, the thing in the depths of the gray fog did not let the ghost soldiers appear. Lin Yu had been stationed here for a month. At this moment, he looked at the gray fog and sneered, "You can be afraid too?" He now knew that the number of ghost soldiers was not unknown, but limited. After Lin Yu's continuous killing, even the thing in the gray fog could not withstand it. If he continued to let Lin Yu kill, in the end, he might not have any ghost soldiers to control and go to the world to find nourishment. Lin Yu saw the fear in the depths of the gray fog. Now that there were no more Yin soldiers to kill, he had no intention of staying here any longer. He was about to get up and leave. It was likely that the thing in the depths of the fog had suffered a great loss in the past few months. Now that so many Yin soldiers had been killed, the time of his emergence would undoubtedly be delayed for a long time. He was unwilling to accept this. He wanted to attack Lin Yu, who was about to leave. Humph! Lin Yu snorted coldly. With a lift of his hand, he directly absorbed that thing's technique. He did not forget to mock it and said, "Many thanks." After that, the thing in the depths of the gray fog fell silent. Lin Yu also left the ruins. At this moment, He had arrived on the land of Evernight and was gazing at the desolate land. There was another reason for him to leave this place, and that was because he seemed to have reached a bottleneck. Although the Tao guiding scripture could eliminate the hidden dangers of bottlenecks and breakthroughs, it was still not enough. However, Lin Yu's breakthrough speed was simply too fast. Since ancient times, there had never been an existence with a breakthrough speed like Lin Yu's. Even the Tao induction scripture could not eliminate this hidden danger. He needed some time to settle down. When the time comes, I might be able to enter the depths of the gray fog and absorb that thing. Lin Yu's eyes shone brightly. He wanted to use that thing to break through the final step, which was the 10th step. He wanted to fuse with his own Tao fruit and truly ascend to that supreme realm. Lin Yu took out the bronze lamp given by the Divine Master. The inextinguishable flame within it pointed the way. Hence, it saved Lin Yu a lot of effort. Along the way, Lin Yu was also constantly comprehending blazing heaven. He had integrated it into his own cultivation. It turns out that blazing heaven is just as Lu Yu said. It can no longer be considered a spell. It is a type of Tao, the Tao of imperial art. Lin Yu said slowly along the way. Blazing heaven was filled with mysteries. It could fuse all the spells one had mastered into one and completely integrate with one's own body. Hence, when the Divine Master attacked earlier, it could be seen that even without using any spells or divine abilities, his attacks were already beyond divine abilities and spells. It was filled with endless mysteries. Furthermore, according to Lu Yu, the Divine Court had more than one type of divine ability that was comparable to blazing heaven. Although this world does not have a deep understanding of the Tao, it has already reached the pinnacle of divine abilities and spells. Lin Yu muttered to himself. It just so happened that it complemented his current state. Lin Yu spent a month walking out of the land of eternal night. During this month, he had completely grasped blazing heaven. Now, he was able to completely control his great void 8 divisions to an unprecedented degree. It was as if he could fuse his strongest techniques with a raise of his hand and turn them into even more terrifying technique. This was the mystery of blazing heaven. He arrived at the territory of the North Star ancient nation and did not stop for long. He immediately set off on his way back. On the way, he stepped onto many ancient realm entrances of the Divine Court. In just a few days, he returned to the Fu Ho country. He met Lu Yu and the others. The North Star ancient nation is about to make a big move. The Pavilion Lord of the Divine Secret Pavilion said. On the way back, Lin Yu also understood some things. At this moment, he said, is it starting with the Sage King election of the Bright Moon Nunnery? That's right. The Pavilion Lord of the Divine Secret Pavilion said. Xing was also present. After the Divine Master returned to the North Star ancient nation, he left. Lu Yu also followed the Divine Master. He took the reincarnation talisman and disappeared without a trace. It seemed that he was going to accomplish something big. Since that's the case, let's go to the Bright Moon Nunnery. It's a good chance to fulfill my promise, Lin Yu said. This time, the old emperor of the North Star ancient nation has awakened with the current 7th prince. It seems that he is determined to get the Sage King's seat of the Bright Moon Nunnery. Xing looked at Lin Yu and said, it doesn't matter, Lin Yu said. Back then, the old emperor fought with the Divine Master. At that time, he was already at the 5th level of the 9th step. Now, I'm afraid. Xing was worried. It's nothing to worry about, Lin Yu said calmly. Xing could no longer see through Lin Yu's cultivation. However, he did not expect Lin Yu to break through to the 5th level of the 9th step in just a few months. Lin Yu wasn't boasting. Instead, he really didn't care about the Imperial Emeritus of the North Star ancient country anymore. Back then, when the old emperor was still on the throne, he gathered countless experts to attack the Divine Court. However, in the end, the acting Divine Master suppressed everything. This was also the reason why the old emperor abdicated. The pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion obviously knew many secrets. At this moment, he said, now that the old emperor has reappeared, his strength should have broken through again. The pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion reminded Lin Yu not to be careless. In fact, he should have left with the divine master. However, he wanted to go to the Bright Moon Nunnery to meet an old friend. Hence, the divine master gave him a mission. He wanted to organize the prince of the North Star ancient nation to marry the holy maiden of the Bright Moon Nunnery. The origin of the Bright Moon Nunnery was very mysterious. The divine court already knew that the Bright Moon Nunnery came from the other side of the land of Evernight. However, they did not know what their purpose was. Now, the entire North Star ancient nation was about to undergo a huge change. It was related to the other side of the land of Evernight. The divine court would not allow the North Star ancient nation to marry the Bright Moon Nunnery. This was a huge threat to the divine court. I can take care of the old emperor, Lin Yu said. Since the divine court wanted to stop this marriage, and he had promised Lu Rian and Yu Linglong, it was time for him to pay a visit to the Bright Moon Nunnery. The pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion looked at Lin Yu meaningfully. He did not say anything else. In the next 3 days, Lin Yu refined a 9th-level pill. It allowed the pavilion master of the divine secret pavilion to recover to his peak. He became a 9th-step expert again and looked much younger. At the same time, with the support of Lin Yu's pill, Sheng also broke through to the 8th step. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.